Chapter 647. Whoosh, whoosh. At this time, several figures rushed out of the broken window and saw the scene in the hall. They couldn't help but be stunned on the spot. Dean turned to look at them. He recognized Francis as the leader of the Saint Squad. He was the one who had brought him into the inner wall. Roar! Haisha growled and shook off the black-robed woman who had lost her life. She turned her head and stared at Francis and the others ferociously. Her body flashed and appeared in front of Francis and the others in an instant. Her hand passed through the throat of a burly young saint. The latter didn't even have time to react. His eyes were wide open. Dean quickly raised his hand and shook the bell. Aisha, who was about to pounce on the others, suddenly stopped her body with 3 thumps. Francis and others woke up. They felt as if they had fallen into an ice cave. Their bodies shivered slightly. Aisha, who had pierced her companion's throat, gave them a mountain-like pressure. Francis's throat was stiff. His eyes slowly climbed to Aisha's face. His pupils shrank as he looked at Aisha's face. It was followed by fear, as if he had seen the end of the world. How could this person be here? Did the monastery send you? Dudian asked. Francis's eyes were glued to Aisha's body. He turned his head and looked at Dean next to him. The horror on his face turned into astonishment. It's you? How can you be here? This is my territory. Who else can be here except me? Dean wasn't in a hurry to kill them. The monastery had sent a pioneer and 5 saints, which was beyond his expectation. He thought that they would send at most a few saints. He didn't expect that they would directly send a pioneer. It was not like the situation in the fairy tale where the main character kept sending the minions as practice targets. Then the main character would become stronger all the way and grow up to hang the villain boss. Your territory? Francis was dumbfounded. He turned his head and looked at Aisha. Aisha's face was expressionless, and her pupils were completely black. He felt a trace of familiarity with this scene, but he couldn't remember where he had seen such a similar situation. At this moment, the sound of hurried footsteps came from outside. Richelieu was the first to rush into the hall. He saw the messy scene and the corpses on the ground. His face changed. The next moment, his eyes fell on Francis and the others. He was startled for a moment and immediately rushed to Dean's side. He asked with concern, Master, are you okay? Dean indifferently said, It's okay. Ask the guards outside to retreat. Tell them that the assassin has been dealt with. Yes. Richelieu nodded respectfully. Before he left, he glanced at Francis. He knew that they were all going to die here. He sighed in disappointment. Francis looked at Richelieu, who had jogged over and then retreated respectfully. His eyes widened in disbelief. How could he be like this? What did the monastery say when they sent you here? Dudian said in an indifferent tone, If you tell the truth, I may let you live. Francis looked at the legendary girl next to him and then at Dean. His heart was full of shock. He hurriedly said, We are old acquaintances. Today was a misunderstanding. We just came to check the situation of the outer wall. We have no malice. Francis squeezed out a kind smile. Dean lived in the holy temple where only the Pope could live. It was obvious that the change in the outer wall was caused by this teenager who was once a prisoner. Moreover, there was a legendary girl next to him. Could it be that the dragon family was ready to take control of the outer wall and start a war with the monastery? The monastery is aware of the change of the Pope. They sent you here to assassinate the new Pope and capture Richelieu. Dean indifferently said, Don't play tricks with me. I just want to know the current situation of the monastery and the current situation of the inner wall. Francis's face slightly changed as he saw that Dudian had expected everything. He was impressed by the youth's intelligence last time. He knew that Dudian wouldn't give up today. He immediately said, You have basically told us everything we know. As for the situation in the inner wall, I don't know what you want to know. I don't know where to start. The matters of the Monster Research Institute, the dragon family, the nobles of the inner wall, and the monastery. Dudian said in a cold voice, Tell me everything you know. The one who says more will live. Francis's face changed as he felt the commotion behind him. He knew that Dean was ruthless and merciless. Moreover, the legendary girl was next to him. It was impossible for him to escape. He immediately said, I'll say that the dragon family hasn't had any major events recently. Oh yes, the dragon family has replaced the saintess. He looked at Aisha, who was next to him. Continue. Yes, after a while, Francis finished his story. Dean looked at the people behind him. Is there anything else to add? They looked at each other as they didn't know how to answer. Dean slowly walked past one of the youths. The youth didn't have time to relax as he felt a pain in his neck. His consciousness was cut off, and his body softly fell down. The other two clenched their weapons in anger as they saw Dean attack the youth. They wanted to attack, but held back. Dean swung the dagger and said in a cold voice, Is there anything to add? The two of them looked at each other. One of the women said, If we tell you, will you really let us go? Of course. Dean indifferently said, I always mean what I say. The woman gritted her teeth. Captain didn't say anything about the core of the monastery. I can add that the monastery has spent a lot of effort to control the outer wall. The first reason is that a legendary preacher of the monastery left a notice to educate the barbarians. The second reason is that the population of the outer wall isn't small. Although the conditions are bad, but the population is close to the population of the inner wall. So we have included the outer wall into the strategic deployment area of the monastery. I don't know about the specific deployment, but it seems that we are preparing for the future battle. Why didn't you send saints over? Dean asked. Yes. The woman said, We sent 5 supervisors. Such a force is enough to monitor the outer wall. I didn't expect them to be destroyed. Dean nodded and looked at the other young man. Do you have anything to add? The young man's face was pale. I want to say the same as them. What about you? Only one of you can live. Dean looked at Francis. Francis was in a cold sweat. His mood was complex and contradictory. The people behind him were his brothers who had gone through life and death with him. I'll talk. Francis clenched his fists, gritted his teeth, and said, We have told you everything we know. I also know that the Elder's magic mark is the legendary Shadow Hunter. Francis, you. The two men behind him glared at him, their faces flushed with anger. Chapter 648. Aisha, who was motionless, roared as she heard the bell. She rushed towards Francis and the other two. Francis was shocked and hurriedly raised his hand to block the attack. But as soon as he raised his arm, he felt a sharp object piercing through his chest. His body was violently thrown out and smashed onto the floor. Didn't you say? He panicked and was ready to climb up from the ground while angrily questioning Dean next to him. But before he could finish his words, a black shadow appeared in his line of sight. With a bang, Francis' head was twisted off and his body fell to the ground. His expression was still extremely angry as he stared at the ground. In the blink of an eye, 3 people were beheaded by Aisha. They didn't have the strength to fight back. Dean shook the bell in time to stop Aisha from grabbing one of them. He took out a handkerchief and helped her wipe the blood from her mouth and fingers. But there were still bloodstains on her hands. He turned and called Richelieu, who was guarding the entrance of the hall. Tell people to come and clean up their bodies. Tell them that the dark believers attacked the Pope. Parade them in the streets and burn them in public. Richelieu nodded as he looked at the corpses on the ground. He didn't expect the saints sent by the inner wall to die so quickly. They didn't even hurt Dean's hair. All of this was done by the woman who was always by Dean's side. She was definitely the strongest line of defense around him. She was the most dangerous and the most beautiful line of defense. Barton got the news after Richelieu left. He was relieved to see that Dean wasn't injured, but he noticed the corpses on the ground and the broken windows. He was surprised. Master, are you okay? Did they come to assassinate me? Yes. Dean nodded. Barton still had a lingering fear in his heart. He didn't think that these people would be able to climb up the cliff behind the temple. If he lived here alone, he would have probably been beheaded a long time ago. Fortunately, Master, you are here, otherwise He thanked Duddian. Although he knew that he wouldn't have been assassinated if he wasn't the pontiff, but it was a fact that Duddian saved his life again. Dean slightly waved his hand. The person who wants to hurt you is my enemy. This matter is also caused by me. It's getting late. Go to sleep. I'll deal with it. Barton looked at the corpses on the ground. The pungent smell of blood made his stomach churn, and he felt like vomiting, but he forced himself to endure it. He thought to himself, how can I sleep after such a big thing happened tonight? Although he thought about it, he still agreed and left the place. It really took courage to stay with a few corpses. You worked hard. Dean took Aisha back to the chair after Barton left. The coldness on his face had melted. He touched her cold hands. Next time they will send stronger people. Fortunately, you were by my side. Aisha was expressionless and didn't speak. After a while, Richelieu brought a team of Knights of Light into the hall. They dragged the corpses away and dealt with them. They called the servants to clean the ground several times to disperse the smell of blood. Dean took clean water and washed Aisha's fingers and lips. He took her to the other side of the hall and sat down. He estimated that it was almost time for the other forces to take action. The corpses of Francis and the others were escorted by the Knights of Light and paraded through the streets. Countless passers-by gathered and pointed at the corpses. The news of the Pope's assassination spread to the military headquarters and the Knights' Hall. General, I've personally looked at the corpses. The faces of the Dark Believers were destroyed and couldn't be identified. Their deaths were tragic. It wasn't caused by weapons. It seems like they were forcibly torn apart by something. Forcibly torn apart? Yes. I also asked someone to secretly shoot arrows at the corpses. The result was very surprising. The arrows didn't pierce the corpses of these people. According to this subordinate's guess, these people's physique is mostly at the top hunter level, or their magic marks are inclined to strengthen their bodies. Oh, the arrows couldn't pierce the corpses? Are you sure? I'm sure. It seems that the Dark Church has sent out all their masters. I didn't expect that the Dark Church would have hidden such a powerful master. Their corpses weren't damaged by arrows. I don't know how strong they would be if they were alive. On the other side of the Knights' Hall, everyone was discussing. The Dark Church can't wait to make a move. It seems that the glory of the new Pope isn't completely fake. They should have sent a lot of masters to assassinate the Pope. I didn't expect them to all die. The strength of the new Pope can't be underestimated. There may be masters hidden around him. If we can know which masters they sent from the Dark Church, then we can know the strength of the Holy Church. When the corpses of Francis and the others were paraded in the street, the most surprised people were the dark followers who were hiding in the dark alleys. When they saw the black tattoos on the corpses, they were disappointed but also excited. They didn't expect that the Dark Church they were loyal to was so powerful that they dared to assassinate the Pope. Although they failed, but most likely the Pope was scared out of his wits. At the same time, the elders of the Dark Church held an emergency meeting after they got the news. Who sent people to assassinate the Pope? Which faction did it? Why didn't you discuss this matter in advance? Aren't you beating the grass to scare the snake? Bastard. Everyone was angry as they questioned the person who made the decision. However, after half an hour of questioning, it seemed that no one had sent people to assassinate the Pope. Some people were dumbfounded for a moment. Soon they thought that it was possible that other forces had framed the Dark Church. At the end of the meeting, the elders of the 12 districts received a secret letter from Dean. Sword King read the contents of the letter. Everyone was stunned as they looked at each other. They didn't expect that Dean was the one who directed the assassination. Moreover, it seemed that the purpose of the assassination was to pave the way for the military headquarters and the Knights' Hall. Terrible. The entire conference room was silent after the secret letter was read. In the blink of an eye, the day passed. Chapter 649. Master Commander-in-Chief Bryson has colluded with the Dark Believers. Barton was shocked as he heard Dudion's words. The news was too shocking. Dudion was one of the most powerful people in the military headquarters. It was unbelievable that he had dealings with the dirty and evil followers of the dark religion. Collusion is false, but he is guilty. Dean didn't deceive Barton. The only obstacles in front of us are the military headquarters and the magistrate. The Knights' Hall is nothing to be afraid of. They will be trampled under the feet of the believers. We don't hurt others, so we won't be hurt by others. We seem to be high and mighty, but in fact there is no way to retreat. Do you know? Barton understood half of Dean's words. Although he didn't fully understand, but he understood 2 points. First was that Commander-in-Chief Bryson was wronged because he was the enemy. Second was that Dean's purpose was to rule the entire outer wall. Perhaps this was just the beginning. He didn't know what to say. In his mind, the title Commander-in-Chief contained too much solemnity. He didn't think that he would be slandered and destroyed because he was an obstacle. He didn't know whether Dean was right or wrong. He was at a loss. Dean understood Barton's thoughts from his expression. He patted his shoulder. Don't think too much about it. Think about what the military has done. Think about the families of the civilians who were forcibly separated by the military. Think about the military's bullying of the civilians. It's all because of their lack of discipline. They acquiesce to it. That's their sin. Barton stared blankly for a moment. In his mind, scenes of the army coming to the slums and forcibly arresting able-bodied men suddenly appeared. The softness in his heart immediately hardened. He nodded forcefully and said, "I know, they're not worthy of sympathy. Go," Dudeen said. Richelieu sighed in his heart as he watched Barton leave. He turned to look at the black-haired boy and said, "Are we really going to attack the military? Bryson is the commander-in-chief. Even if the Dark Church cooperates and produces conclusive evidence to prove that he is colluding with the Dark Believers, the military will not let us take him away so easily. Otherwise, I would have used this method long ago. You didn't use it before because you had too many concerns." Dean's face was indifferent. There are too many concerns and too little courage. In the past, aristocrats, military generals, as long as they have privileges, even if they colluded with the Dark Church and committed despicable acts, you would turn a blind eye to it. Some aristocrats sell human organs. Some sell orphans from slums. You are aware of these things, but you acquiesce to them. This is your sin. Every one of us is guilty, and every one of the U.S. deserves to die. Dean stood on the steps and looked down at him. But only the strong can judge others. The biggest sin of death is being weak. Richelieu was stunned. He lowered his head in silence. Bryson will not give in obediently, and the military will not allow such a thing to happen. They will lose face and prestige, and will resist tenaciously. This is a declaration of war, Dean said in a cold voice. My purpose in controlling the Holy Church is to use the name of the Holy Church to sweep away all forces. No matter what the war is, as long as you stand on the side of the people's will, you will always win. This is the lesson that history has taught us. You will never understand. Richelieu's heart was touched. As the Pope, he had managed the Holy Church for many years. He was deeply aware of the importance of the existence of faith. There was no need to spend any resources. With just a few words, countless believers were willing to sacrifice their lives without fear. This was the power of faith. But the youth in front of him was more thorough. It was the will of the people. The nobles, the military, and even the Knights' Hall didn't take the commoners seriously. Just from the way the commoners blurted out the word untouchables, it was easy to see what kind of discrimination it was. However, only he knew that although the commoners were weak, they could be an unbeatable force when they gathered together. It was enough to overthrow everything. And this point, besides him, this youth was actually able to comprehend it as well. Just this breadth of vision alone was enough to make him feel terrified. This is not an arrest operation, but a full-scale declaration of war. Dean stared at Richelieu. This time I need you to personally lead the team. Let the King of Light cooperate with you to defeat the military in one fell swoop. Do you understand? Richelieu stared at him blankly. After a while, he slowly lowered his head. I understand. I will do it. Go. I'll be here waiting for your good news. Dean indifferently said. Richelieu deeply bowed and turned to leave. The entire Holy Church was boiling when the Holy Edict came out. The news quickly spread to all forces and even to the civilians. Commander-in-Chief Bryson is colluding with the Dark Believers? Oh my God, the dignified Commander-in-Chief is mixing with the Dark Believers. No wonder the Dark Believers are so arrogant. In recent days, they have been appearing in the commercial district. It turns out that there is a military backing them. Will the military hand over Bryson? They won't let the Holy Church take away such a big deal. In the past, they arrested a general who had made a deal with the Dark Believers. It caused a lot of friction. Is this news true? The civilians speculated. The nobles of the 6 consortiums, magistrate and the Knights' Hall, were shocked when they heard the news. They knew the consequences of the Holy Church's announcement. It was equivalent to a formal declaration of war with the military. If the Holy Church retreated, then the prestige of the Holy Church would be greatly damaged. But if Bryson was sentenced, then the prestige of the military would be damaged. This news was equivalent to a declaration of war between the 2 forces. Father, is this true? Is Commander-in-Chief Bryson colluding with the Dark Believers? Child, your political awareness is still too shallow. The Holy Church is deliberately looking for an excuse to start a war. Moreover, if the Holy Church wins, then the outer wall will be dominated by the Holy Church. So that's how it is. In other words, this thing is fake? It doesn't matter if it's true or false. What's important is power. People will take it seriously even if it's a lie. People will take it seriously if it's a lie or not. People will take it seriously if it's a lie or not. I see. It's like us aristocrats. No matter what we say, the untouchables will believe it. Yes, the untouchables won't be jealous of the aristocrats, but they will be jealous of the untouchables. Chapter 650. Riley, there's something I want you to do. Inside the temple, Dean called Riley, who was accompanying Barton. Help me go to the military region and pick up a person. His name is Joseph, and his rank shouldn't be high. Go to the Elder Hawkeye of the 9th region and ask him to give you detailed information. In addition, ask him to send people to assist you in this matter. Be sure to pick up this person safely. Riley bowed his head. Yes. Don't pick up the wrong person. Dean looked at him and handed him a letter. Help me pass this to Hawkeye. Yes. Riley bowed his head. This is your paladin badge. You don't need to sneak in and out of the Holy Church. Dean threw him a blue badge. I know what your wish is. I'll let you fulfill your wish after you finish this matter. Riley's body slightly trembled. Yes. Dean got up and came to the entrance of the temple. He saw Barton practicing his swordsmanship in front of the grass target. He called out to him. Barton heard the call and immediately stopped. He turned around and put away the wooden sword. He wiped the sweat off his forehead and trotted over the steps. He came to Dean and asked, Master, are you looking for me? I haven't given you any gifts after following me for so long. Dean took out a handkerchief and wiped the sweat from Barton's forehead. I have something for you. Come with me. Barton was moved as he looked at Dean, who was carefully wiping the sweat from his forehead. Although he felt that Dean was very different from before, but there was no difference in the way Dean treated him. Young master, you've already given me the position of Pope. I can't take anything else from you. Barton quickly said. Dean handed him the handkerchief. Let's take a look. Barton took the handkerchief and slightly clenched it. He followed Dean into the hall. Dean came to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out a black wooden box. There is a rare and precious parasitic soul worm inside. It's called the Listener. I asked someone to find it for you. Now that you are in high position, you will encounter hostility from all directions in the future. You have to improve your strength. Are you willing to use it? Barton was dumbfounded. He was no longer an ignorant and inexperienced person. When he was an apprentice knight, he already knew about the existence of magic marks, as well as the differences in levels. And the rare parasitic soul worm was basically the best magic mark. As for the more powerful legendary parasitic soul worm, it only existed in the legend, and no one had ever seen it. He did not expect that Dean would quietly prepare such a big gift for him. Yes, of course I'm willing. Barton was grateful in his heart, but then he thought of something and said, such a precious magic mark. Do you really want to give it to me? If it is wasted, you are my brother. If I don't give it to you, who else would I give it to? Dean patted his shoulder. In the future, if we defeat the inner wall and get a legendary parasitic soul worm, then I'll give it to you. Barton's eyes were slightly moist. He lowered his head so that Dean wouldn't see him. But his heart was moved beyond words. After a moment, he took a deep breath and said, I'm already very satisfied to get this. Dean handed him the black wooden box. You can use the resources to upgrade the magic mark. There should be a lot of God's blessings stored in the Holy Church. Barton nodded and held the wooden box tightly. At the same time, there was a fierce debate in the conference room of the military headquarters in the west of the commercial district. How dare the Holy Church do this? They are openly slandering Commander Bryson. Is the new Pope's brain kicked by a pig? The Holy Church is ready to declare war on us. Humph, they actually found such a poor excuse. Sir, we swear to defend you. A group of generals were filled with righteous indignation. Some of the hot-tempered ones even slapped the table. Bryson sat on the left side of the seat of honor with a gloomy expression. He didn't expect that the Vatican would attack them so soon after the new emperor was appointed. Shouldn't they focus on dealing with the voices of the rebels within the Vatican? Moreover, out of the 3 commanders, he was chosen. No matter what the outcome was, it would be an irreparable loss to his personal reputation. Commander Bryson. Lorenzo, who was next to him, turned to look at him. His eyes were deep, as if he could see the depths of Bryson's heart. But Bryson calmly looked back at him. There was no fear in his eyes. Lorenzo slowly said, "We believe that you won't collude with the Dark Believers. The Holy Church didn't discuss the news with us in advance. They should be ready to seize you." Bryson's eyes flashed. "If I'm guilty, I'm willing to bear it alone." "No." One of the generals immediately stood up and shouted, "You are the commander-in-chief of our military region. How can you let the Holy Church put you on trial? Who do they think they are? I don't believe it." "That's right." Someone immediately agreed. "It's ridiculous that the Holy Church is slandering you. They want to put you on trial? They are overestimating themselves." Lorenzo nodded slightly. "Yes, you represent our entire military region. We won't let you bear it alone. No matter what evidence the Holy Church has, we must make them give us a reasonable explanation. This is openly undermining the prestige of our military region." Bryson didn't speak. He knew that his identity was too embarrassing at this time. Not speaking was the best way. If the Holy Church wants to put the commander-in-chief on trial, they will have to ask the sword in my hand. I don't believe that the Holy Church dares to go to war with our military region. This order was issued by the new pope. Most of them want to step on Commander Bryson's shoulder to deter others. Lorenzo saw that the generals were getting emotional. He raised his hand and said, "Immediately send someone to the Holy Church to ask about this matter. Also tell them that they won't have a good result if they start a war with our military region." "Commander, I'm willing to go myself." "Commander, I'll go." Several generals immediately raised their hands. Lorenzo glanced at the female generals and said, "Lorraine, you go. You have a meticulous mind, so it's best if you go. Remember, don't be too tough and don't be weak." "Yes." The female general immediately stood up. At the same time, Riley arrived at the 9th region. He handed the letter to Hawkeye. Hawkeye opened the letter and quickly read it. Riley quietly looked at him. Chapter 651. Riley's eyes flickered, but he did not ask. Hawkeye glanced at him, pondered for a moment, and said, "You go and pick him up first. I will send 5 knight leaders to assist you. This is the information on Joseph. Don't make a mistake." Riley took it, glanced at it, and nodded, "Got it." After Riley left, Hawkeye immediately called his secretary and asked her to write several secret letters and send them to various places as fast as possible. Military, pitiful. Hawkeye put away the secret letters and burned them on a candle, sighing softly. At the foot of Mount Wuta'aw, Richelieu was wearing the holy armor of the past, sitting on his holy son dragon horse majestically. In the large square in front of him, there were constantly knights of light gathering, densely packed, occupying the entire square. There were about tens of thousands of people, almost more than 60% of the troops of the Vatican stationed in the business district, although the number of knights of the Vatican could not be compared to the number of soldiers of the army. But in terms of quality, they were far superior. "Your Majesty," a burly middle-aged man, riding on a 3-meter-tall horse, galloped over from afar. A 3-meter-long sword hung on the side of his horse's abdomen. It was nearly half a meter wide. It was extremely huge. Richelieu looked at the man and waited until he came close before saying, "PLO, don't call me your majesty anymore. If it wasn't for the fact that this matter is too troublesome, I was prepared to find a field to live a simple life. PLO's bell-like eyes stared, bright and full of expression, and said, "In my heart, you will always be my majesty. Why did you let that brat, that person be the pope? Is it really like what they said, that you are unwell? I'm old, it's time to step aside." Richelieu shook his head slightly. "Let's not talk about this. This time we will lead the team to arrest Bryson. Are you ready? Are we really going to break off relations with the military?" PLO's face showed some seriousness. Although he looked rough, it did not mean that he was brainless. Richelieu glanced at him and said, "Watch your words. We uphold the belief of punishing evil and eradicating evil. Bryson has colluded with the dark cultists, and the evidence is conclusive. No matter who he is, he must pay the price for his actions. This is the meaning of our existence." PLO immediately said solemnly, "Your subordinate misspoke. You are right. Let's go." Richelieu pulled the reins of his horse and said, "Let the main force follow behind. You will follow me and lead the light cavalry to the military base first. We will treat them politely. If the military base insists on protecting Bryson, then we will consider using forceful methods." "I got it." Luo nodded. The news of the movement of the church's army spread through the streets. Countless commoners and nobles along the way all heard of this news. Seeing the formation, they instantly knew that the church was serious this time. The news quickly spread to the conference room of the military headquarters. The people who hadn't left the meeting heard the news and immediately fell into silence. Richelieu and the Great Light King, Pulo, are actually going into battle personally? Are they going to start a war with us? The Light Curia has come so quickly. They're trying to catch us off guard. It seems that they have also expected that this matter will not go as they wish. Damn it, General Roland has just set off. Lorenzo glanced at the furious generals and turned to look at Bryson. He knew that this was not the time for internal strife. Although the three commanders usually fought each other secretly, if they were to fight internally this time, it would only allow the church to succeed. In the end, even if there was one less commander, it would still cause the military base to lose all its face. It would also cause him, who is also a commander, to lose face. Delay them first and wait for Roland's reply. Lorenzo immediately ordered, "Call back the troops of the city defense department and prepare for battle." Yes, a five-star general who was the head of the city defense department immediately stood up to receive the order. A moment later, Richelieu and Pulo led a group of light cavalry to the front of the military headquarters. The back of the compound was not just a manor, but a vast green field. It contained the military camp of the military base, the residence of the general, as well as the training grounds and many other places. It was an important area of the military base, and also a restricted area for civilians. Richelieu stopped his horse and looked at a guard who trotted over to the front of the compound. The guard had already received the news from above. Seeing the majestic Richelieu and Pulo sitting on the tall horses, his heart was nervous and in awe. Although he did not believe in the Light Curia, his wife was very religious, including his mother and father. Under the atmosphere of the family's religious beliefs, he was more or less infected. At this moment, facing the two supreme figures of the Curia, he only felt as if there were two mountains on his head and shoulders, making him unconsciously bend down and lower his head. "Boy, go call someone who can take charge," Pulo shouted before the guard could speak. The guard was shocked and hurriedly said, Yes, I'll go now. Please wait a moment." After saying that, he did not care about being rude and hurriedly turned around and ran. After a moment, Lorenzo came out on horseback with several generals. He saw Richelieu and Pulo stopped at the gate. There were dozens of light cavalry behind them. Lorenzo's eyes moved slightly. He gently pressed on the horse's back, and the mount immediately slowed down. He slowly walked towards Richelieu and smiled. "Mr. Richelieu, Mr. Pulo, the people below don't know any better. Please come in with me." With a smile on his face, Richelieu said, "They say that soldiers are straightforward. Commander, please don't beat around the bush with us. I'm sure you know why we're here. Give us a straightforward answer. Are you going to hand him over or bail him out? Lorenzo's smile slowly disappeared as he saw Richelieu being so direct. He looked at him. Do you have any evidence that Commander Bryson is colluding with the Dark Believers? There's something fishy about this matter. I think it's better to investigate and then arrest the culprit. After all, Bryson is the commander of our military region. How will we maintain the security of the outer wall if he's arrested by you? Naturally, we have evidence. Richelieu said, if you don't believe me, then please let Commander Bryson come out to meet us. Lorenzo slightly frowned. Commander Bryson is performing official duties outside. I can help you call him back, but it will take some time. How about you come in with me to rest? Richelieu narrowed his eyes. No need. We will wait here. Lorenzo didn't say much as he saw that Duddy didn't eat soft words. He politely said a few words and then rode back. That old bastard Richelieu. He doesn't listen to good words. Does he really think that the military region is afraid of him? One of the generals said in an angry tone as they entered the courtyard. Although he deliberately restrained his voice, but it wasn't difficult to hear his words since they weren't far from the courtyard. Lorenzo looked at him and knew that he was deliberately saying this for Richelieu to hear. He said, don't be rude. When the matter is investigated, they will give Commander Bryson justice. Although he was reprimanding the general, there was no anger on his face. Little bastard. There was a trace of anger in Poulot's eyes as he heard the voices coming from the back of the courtyard. He tightened his grip on the rope. Richelieu indifferently said, don't be angry. The dog bit you, so you can't bite the dog back. Poulot slightly gritted his teeth. He knew that the other party was deliberately provoking them. The military region would take the opportunity to cover up Bryson's matter. Richelieu heard the sound of hooves of Lorenzo and others going away. He turned to Poulot. Don't worry. Since they want to delay, then let them do it. The longer they delay, the better it is for us. Good for us? Poulot was puzzled. Chapter 652. Under the dusty sky, black crows flew out of the divine hall on top of Wutuo Mountain. Their dark wings carried the flames of war. With Wutuo Mountain as the center, they drew out streaks of flames in all directions. A certain nobleman was drinking wine and hugging a woman. He looked at the graceful dancers at the banquet and laughed heartily. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of a black crow flying over the windowsill, and his expression changed slightly. A deacon wearing a white robe was immersed in the details of today's cases. He heard the sound of wings flapping outside the window. He turned around and saw a black crow perched on the window lattice. There was a fine scroll tied to its claws. The dark pupils of the crow reflected his own face. In the ancient castle of a golden knight, the knight was hugging his beloved woman, wiping his dagger and gently playing with it while chatting with his lover. Suddenly, his ears twitched, and he looked out of the window beside him. A tiny shadow was flying towards him. Lorraine galloped down the street on her black mane horse. She looked straight ahead, in the direction of Mount Wutuo. She didn't notice that a black crow flew straight over her head, flapping its wings in the distance behind her. After a moment, Lorraine arrived in front of Utopia Mountain. She pulled the rope of the horse and shouted, "General of the military, Lorraine, I'm here to see the Pope. Quickly go and report." The attendants at the foot of the mountain looked at each other. One of them respectfully trotted up the stairs. "General," Dean narrowed his eyes as he heard the news from Barton. "It seems that the military doesn't want to make a big move and tear all pretense of cordiality with us." Barton was curious. Is the military not as strong as us? Of course they are stronger than us. Dean indifferently said, but the stronger the person is, the more they care about their feathers. The strong won't easily fight with others. Once they are injured, then they are no longer strong. Barton didn't really understand and asked, "Then what do we do now? You are the Pope. How can a general of the military see you? Let her wait." Dean glanced at him. "I'll leave this matter to you. Think about how to do it yourself." Barton was startled and suddenly felt a trace of embarrassment. Previously, he had a vague feeling of restraint in his heart. All the ideas were decided by Dean, which made him a little uncomfortable. But now that Dean had handed everything over to him, he suddenly felt like he was holding a hot potato in his hands. He didn't know how to deal with it. If he didn't handle it well, it would ruin the big plan. Barton scratched his head and said, "Well, I think it's better if you take care of this, young master." "It's fine. I won't blame you." Barton knew that there was no room for maneuver as he saw Dean turn around. He felt that it was very painful for him to make the decision himself. "Then I'll go." He bit the bullet. Go. When Lorraine stepped onto Mount Wutaw, the 18 noble families of the Huashing Financial Group on the other side expressed their support for the church's crusade. At the same time, the 3 famous masters in the poetry world also published articles in the Express at the same time. Their slogan was extremely loud: "Purify all darkness." For a time, many masters who were deeply loved by the common people, including painters and musicians, all stood up to express their views. "I hope the military doesn't harbor criminals." As the dignified commander-in-chief, he colluded with the dark cultists and bullied civilians. "It's simply despicable." God said that the existence of light is to dispel all darkness. I agree with the sacrificial spirit of the Holy Church. It will be a disaster for the entire outer wall if the military decides to cover up their accomplices. It will lead to rivers of blood. I hope the military will reconsider. The sword of a knight, the glory of a guardian knight. The sword of the church, the light of the guardian deity. All evil and darkness will be destroyed. I hope that the military can execute Bryson personally and give justice to everyone. Think twice? Think twice, my ass. In the conference room of the military headquarters, everyone looked at the news report that had just been sent to them. All of them were furious. Why don't you accuse the Holy Church of being reckless if you know that it will affect the entire outer wall? A bunch of bastards. A general pounded on the table. They don't distinguish right from wrong. They don't have any evidence, and yet they persuade us to be kind. Shameless. Shameless. We have protected them in the past, and now they are accusing us. They haven't even investigated the matter, and yet they are supporting the Holy Church. What a group of pigs. Another general was equally angry. His beard was trembling. Lorenzo's face was gloomy. There must be something fishy going on here. The Holy Church's hands are deep enough to make the magistrate, the Hall of Knights, the nobles, and the masters all stand up. How sinister. What is Lorraine doing? She hasn't come back yet? Isn't it enough for her to go back and forth to the Holy Church? Another one-eyed general roared. Another person next to him replied, "Don't count on it. It seems that the Holy Church will break off relations with the military. It's useless for Lorraine to go. She will be delayed by them. Damn, the Holy Church. How come I didn't know that they were so cunning? Well, they're deceiving the world in the name of God. They despise God the most. It's too late to say this. What should we do? Do we really have to go to war?" Everyone looked at each other. At this moment, another announcement came from the outside. A captain quickly ran in and handed over the dispatch in his hand. The general, standing at the end of the table, took the news. Another general next to him asked, "What news is it?" "I don't need to read it to know that someone is supporting the Holy Church." Another general mocked. The general who took the news opened the newspaper and quickly glanced through it. His face suddenly changed. He looked at Bryson, who had been sitting silently at the conference table. "Commander, the Holy Church has sealed your castle. They have also found the dark cultists hiding in your property. They're being punished on the street." What? Everyone was shocked. St. Lorenzo couldn't help but look at Bryson, who was next to him, and saw that the latter was also shocked. The other generals looked at Bryson. In addition to shock, there was also a hint of suspicion. Could it be that this was not a slander by the Holy Church, but Bryson was actually secretly colluding with the dark cultists? Thinking of this, the surging atmosphere suddenly became a little cold. Bryson reacted and clenched his fists in anger. This is a frame-up. The despicable Holy Church actually used such a dirty method to frame me. They must have colluded with the Dark Church. Chapter 653. Get out of the way. Get out of the way. On the streets of Berlin, hundreds of knights of light completely surrounded a luxurious manor. At this moment, two knight captains were escorting a stooped old man in a black robe out of the manor. The old man's black robe was dirty and stained with dark green and other strange colored potions. His silver-gray hair was messy and his head was lowered. On his withered arm, which was exposed under the robe, there was a black tattoo that looked like a poisonous snake. Under the sunlight, it was exceptionally eye-catching and frightening. Outside the defensive line formed by a large number of knights, there was a large crowd of onlookers. When they saw the black-robed old man being taken out, someone immediately cried out in surprise and couldn't help but retreat. The black robe was often worn by the Dark Disciples, although some adventurers also prefer to wear it. But the black tattoo was the devil's symbol that everyone feared. It seemed that the pure black pattern itself represented disease, disaster, and death. Dark Disciple, kill him, burn him. Why are you keeping him alive? Burn him. There was a burst of vague roars from the back of the crowd, but the people standing in the front row didn't say anything. It seemed that they were worried that the Dark Disciple would be angered and commit murder. Although there were a large number of knights of light around, and they were under the sun, the shadow that the Dark Disciple had accumulated in their hearts all year round couldn't be dispelled. Did the deepest darkness come from the heart? The old man in a black robe lowered his head as if he didn't hear the screams and roars around him. He silently walked forward. There was a huge shackle on his ankle. With every step he took, the shackle rubbed against his ankle. There was already blood oozing from the shackle and sliding down the back of his foot, staining the ground. He was barefoot. With every step he took, he could feel the roughness of the earth and the thickness of the ground that was warmed by the sun. How long had it been since he walked barefoot like this? He slowly raised his head and looked ahead. He saw the Knights of Light at the defensive line holding hands and forming a circle. Outside the circle, there were countless unfamiliar faces looking at him with fear and anger. Walking from one circle to another, it seemed that it was always out of reach. His gaze continued to move upwards, looking at the fluttering white clouds in the sky. A gentle breeze blew, and he felt bursts of warmth, as well as a kind of relief. It will be over soon, he thought silently in his heart, and a young face appeared in his mind. That was his grandson, and also his only remaining relative. His death would allow him to live. This seemed to be very fair. Birth always seemed to be accompanied by death. Death also meant a new life. He was old, and he felt that it was worth it to exchange his aged body for his grandson's life. After all, he was still a child. He still had many years to live. Behave yourselves, a knight captain berated. The old man staggered 2 steps forward. The pain from a friction of the shackles made him grin slightly, but he endured it and did not cry out. After living for so many years, he was already used to pain. Behind the old man and the 2 commanders, there were dozens of Knights of Light escorting more than a dozen people wearing strange black clothes. The style of these black clothes was strange, but the people of the Dark Church could recognize them at a glance. They were the clothes of apprentices. Soon, all of them were escorted to the street and knelt in a row. The onlookers gradually became bolder as they saw the followers of the Dark Church being so obedient. They roared in anger, "Burn them to death! Burn these devils to death!" A knight captain glanced at the crowd outside. He saw that the time was almost up, so he immediately called a knight to prepare for the execution. "In the name of God, I sentence you." A paladin came, holding a silver sword. He raised it high in the sky. The light shined on the blade of the sword. It was dazzling and reflected a rainbow halo. After reading the sentence, he walked in front of the old man. "Do you have anything else to say?" The old man was silent for a moment, then suddenly shouted, "We pledge our lives to follow Lord Bryson." "Evil creature, damn you!" The paladin roared as he suddenly waved his sword. Puff! The blade of the sword was exceptionally sharp. It instantly cut off the old man's head. A huge head fell to the ground. Blood splashed on the people next to him. A young man who was kneeling next to him was pale. He fell to the ground and screamed in horror. Immediately, a knight pressed down on his shoulder. "Kill! Kill them all!" The shouts outside became even more ferocious. The paladin executed the sentence one by one. Heads fell to the ground one by one. The bloody scene made some women close their eyes in fear. They covered their eyes and retreated to the back of the crowd. Soon, all of them were executed. The knight captain loudly said, "The followers of the Dark Church are conducting evil experiments here. They have all been executed. If you have any clues about the followers of the Dark Church, please report it to the Holy Church. The Holy Church will reward you handsomely." Good. The Holy Church shines brightly. A few voices shouted from the crowd. The rest of the crowd immediately cheered. Waves of earth-shattering cheers could be heard. The two knight captains looked at each other and ordered their subordinates to clean up the corpses on the ground. They also cleaned up the bloodstains. Then, they left the crowd. As they left, the crowd that gathered on the street also gradually dispersed. They only looked at the luxurious manor behind the pool of blood with awe and fear in their eyes. Everyone who lived on this street knew that the owner of this manor was the mansion of Commander Bryson of the military headquarters. Many people also heard the cry of the old man who was beheaded before he died. "I can't believe that Commander Bryson actually colluded with the followers of the Dark Church. And he even harbored the followers of the Dark Church to conduct experiments in his residence. Disgusting. Shoo, lower your voice. Don't let others hear you." The crowd gradually dispersed, whispering to each other. Beside a carriage parked outside a high-class restaurant, a young noble casually looked in the direction of the luxurious manor. Beside him stood a delicate girl. She asked curiously, "Young master, I heard from my father that the church is going to arrest the commander-in-chief of the military this time. Is this true?" The young man said indifferently, "Who cares if it's true or not? What does it have to do with us? What if the Holy Church and the military started fighting? Wouldn't there be a war? That has nothing to do with us nobles. Do you think they would dare to attack us?" "That's true. Let's go and eat your favorite foie gras with plum juice. Commander Bryson, we believe in your innocence. There must be something fishy about this matter." St. Lorenzo looked at the flustered and exasperated Bryson and comforted him. Bryson glanced at him. His heart was filled with anger. He thought, "Maybe you colluded with the Holy Church to frame me. You want to use the Holy Church to get rid of me. Stupid." When the others heard St. Lorenzo's words, they immediately knew that this time the military must protect Commander Bryson. They didn't dare to show any strange expressions. However, they couldn't help but curse in their hearts. "Only you dare to say that the Holy Church colluded with the followers of the Dark Church to frame you. Who would believe that? Since the Holy Church doesn't care about the reputation of our military, we don't need to talk to them anymore. Let's see the truth with our fists." St. Lorenzo looked at the people present and said, "Commander Bryson would never collude with the followers of the Dark Church. The Holy Church is clearly trying to humiliate our military. We must make the Holy Church apologize for this matter. Since they have the so-called evidence to force us to submit, we can only beat them into submission and then discuss with them." The generals looked at each other. They didn't expect that although he was old, his courage was still the same. When he was young, he was nicknamed the Golden Lion. This showed how irritable he was. "I agree with the commander. This battle is unavoidable. The Holy Church investigated the evidence and made a decision without discussing with us in advance. Once we give in, we will never be able to face anyone again. We must make the Holy Church apologize." That's right. Everyone agreed. Bryson was stunned. There was a trace of tears in his eyes. He stood up and held St. Lorenzo's hands. His heart was filled with guilt and gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me. We are old comrades. Don't mention it." St. Lorenzo smiled. Bryson's heart was stirred. Indeed, he and St. Lorenzo were comrades who went through life and death situations together. Later, they both made contributions and became commanders. For so many years, they competed for power and plotted against each other. But he didn't expect that in this life and death situation, the most reliable person was the enemy who they had fought against in the past. Richelieu and the Great Light King are waiting outside. Should we capture them first? A general asked. St. Lorenzo's eyes flickered. "We can't attack directly. Otherwise, even if we win, the people will think that we forced the Holy Church to admit their mistakes. Not only do we have to fight, but we also have to fight on the side of innocence. The generals were excited and looked at him curiously. St. Lorenzo glanced at the crowd and immediately whispered his plan. After listening to his words, the entire place fell into a brief silence. Everyone looked at each other with admiration on their faces. Commander is wise. This is a brilliant plan. This time, we will make the Holy Church's teeth break. Chapter 654. Time back to half an hour ago. I've been waiting for an hour. Is the Pope still not willing to see me? Lorraine angrily looked at the deacon of the Holy Church in front of her. She knew from the attitude of the deacon that it was useless for her to come here. The Holy Church didn't just want to punish Commander Bryson. They wanted to have a decisive battle with the military. General Lorraine, please calm down. His Majesty asked me to invite you over. The deacon smiled. Lorraine felt suffocated. She had already planned to leave. She had rushed here at such a critical moment, and it was impossible that the church did not know her purpose. However, they had left her here with the excuse of dealing with official business. It was obvious that they were deliberately stalling for time. However, after waiting for so long, if he were to leave now, it would be a waste of his time. She gritted her teeth in anger and said, "Then lead the way." She followed the deacon to the temple at the back of St. Mark's Square. She was startled as soon as she entered the temple. Barton was sitting in front of a table. He was wearing a pontiff's robe and holding a scepter. On the other side of the table sat a figure that she recognized at a glance. Dean. She had long heard about this genius, especially during the last barbarian invasion. The news of him donating legendary items for free had spread throughout the outer wall. As a soldier, she knew the situation better than anyone else. She knew how terrible the role of the legendary item was. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was the legendary item that turned defeat into victory for the military and expelled the barbarians from the country. It was also because of this that many soldiers and generals in the military headquarters were grateful to him. This was not as simple as winning or losing a battle, but it had saved the lives of countless soldiers and countless families. Barton looked up at the female general. He was nervous and cramped. "Is there something you want to talk to me about?" Lorraine came back to her senses. She resisted the impulse to go crazy. "Your Majesty the Pope, is it true that you found out that Commander Bryson colluded with the Dark Believers? Commander Lorenzo thinks that there is something fishy about it. I hope you can investigate it in detail so that our military is innocent." Barton didn't know how to respond. He turned to look at Dean. Lorraine was staring at the new Pope's face. She was stunned when she saw the Pope turn around to ask Dean's opinion. She subconsciously looked at the genius who had appeared out of nowhere and then quickly disappeared. She found that the latter's temperament was calm and indifferent. There wasn't the slightest emotion on his face. He was as unfathomable and unreachable as the starry sky. "It's black. How can it be innocent?" Dean glanced at Lorraine. Lorraine was stunned. She even suspected that there was something wrong with her ears. She widened her eyes and said, "Mr. Dew, what did you say?" "I said you're black. How can I bleach you?" Dean repeated patiently. Lorraine was sure that it wasn't an illusion. She turned to look at the new Pope. She saw that the latter was quietly looking at her. It seemed that he had given the right to speak to Dean. She was confused and confused. Although she admired the young genius, but the latter was just a genius. What would he know about the chaos of the entire outer wall? However, she couldn't understand the attitude of the new Pope. She felt incredible. "Mr. Dean, I hope you don't talk nonsense. You should be responsible for your words." Although confused, Lorraine still stared at Dudian and said. At the same time, her favorable impression of Dudian instantly decreased. "Of course I will be responsible." Dean glanced at her. "I have said that I will replace your military region. I will definitely replace your military region. I always mean what I say when it comes to my enemies." Lorraine was stunned. She stared at him in disbelief. "Are you crazy? What nonsense are you talking about?" She turned to Barton. "Your Majesty the Pope, Mr. Dean has maliciously insulted our military region. I ask you to sanction him immediately." Barton slightly spread out his hands. "I can't sanction the young master." Young master? Lorraine was confused. Dean shook his head as he saw her slow response. The military asked you to come over to make a private reconciliation. It's really stupid. If you have any illusions about the enemy, then you will be harming yourself. Just like you are now. Lorraine stared at him blankly. Although she did not understand what he meant, she had already understood. However, the truth was so unbelievable and terrifying that she felt like she was in a dream. You're the real Pope? How? How is it possible that Richelieu would give up his position to you? Why would he work for you? She couldn't imagine how a genius in the field of invention could have the ability to reach this step. You don't need to think about it, because you are the losers. The losers will never know the real reason why they failed. Dean's expression was indifferent as he put the teacup on the table. The three commanders have no way out. They should be planning how to make us suffer and swallow the consequences of their recklessness. I guess they will create a bigger scandal to cover up Commander Bryson's matter. Then they will take the opportunity to attack the Holy Church and get the nominal justice. Lorraine looked at him. Her thoughts were chaotic, and she was at a loss. It's a pity. Your dreams are beautiful, but you will never know how many of my spies are in your military headquarters. Dean looked down at her. Moreover, the military has sent a general here. It's a heavy coffin lid. Lorraine suddenly sobered up. There was a strong, ominous premonition in her heart. What do you want to do? I'm just here to send a message. You can't kill me. Dean indifferently glanced at her and turned to Barton. Are you ready? Barton bowed his head. Master, I'm ready. He revealed his arm, which was wrapped in white bandages. Lorraine was startled. Conference room of the military headquarters. St. Lorenzo raised his hand to suppress the admiration of the generals and said, Just do it. Time is of the essence, and there is no time to lose. Yes. The generals immediately obeyed. Report. Almost at the exact same moment, a report suddenly rang out from outside, and a major rushed in with a dispatch in his hand. Everyone's eyelids twitched as they saw the newspaper in his hand. They instinctively had an ominous feeling. It seemed that every newspaper that came today was bad news. What's the matter? Lorenzo stood up and looked at the newspaper. Chapter 655. Assassinate the Pope? Everyone was stunned. Oh no! St. Lorenzo suddenly came to a realization, and his face became extremely ugly. Damn the Vatican. Their means are so despicable. We made a mistake. We shouldn't have had a glimmer of hope and let Lorraine find them to reconcile. Hearing his words, the others gradually came to their senses and immediately realized the insidiousness of this matter. Obviously, Lorraine was not stupid enough to assassinate the Pope. Instead, she was used by the Pope. In this way, the already disadvantageous situation of the military region became even more passive. Treacherous! How dare you use the messenger you sent? Everyone was furious. At this moment, another major ran in from outside and hurriedly said, Commander, generals, Richelieu and the Great Light King have led the Holy Knight army stationed behind to attack. What? St. Lorenzo and Bryson suddenly stood up, their faces full of shock. The other generals were also stunned. Wasn't the pace of things too fast? They are actually preparing to attack? Are they crazy? St. Lorenzo was extremely shocked and angry, but more than that, he did not understand. Even if Lorraine assassinated the Pope, it is only a matter of a subordinate. How dare they attack our military region? Aren't they afraid of being criticized? The major was sweating profusely and hurriedly said, Reporting to Commander, they did not attack because of the assassination attempt on the Pope. Instead, it was because a senior colonel stationed outside the compound had falsely passed on your orders and shot arrows at Richelieu and the others who were waiting outside the compound. That was why they were angered. What? St. Lorenzo was stunned again. The other generals were also dumbfounded. Damn idiots. They actually... St. Lorenzo's body trembled with anger. He could barely tolerate the assassination of the Pope, but the fact that his subordinate had rashly attacked Richelieu and provoked a war was really intolerable. The significance of this matter was far more terrible than the assassination of the Pope. especially at this critical moment. It was simply a disaster. "What is the situation outside now?" Bryson hurriedly asked. The major hurriedly said, "The senior colonel who falsely passed the military order has been arrested by Major General Moss. But Richelieu and the Great Light King have led the Holy Knight Army to attack us. Our defense has been breached, and it is estimated that they will attack here soon." Hearing this, everyone only felt a buzzing in their heads, a feeling of dizziness. The change of the situation was so unexpected that they could not keep up with it. It must be known that in a direct confrontation, the military was not afraid of the Radiant Church at all. But at this moment, the soldiers stationed at the military headquarters were not in combat mode. First of all, they didn't expect that the Radiant Church would dare to attack them without warning. Second of all, the soldiers were scattered in various barracks, but these barracks were not in the military headquarters, but in other districts. This distribution was mainly to facilitate the support of the soldiers in the war. Even though they had already gathered the troops from these districts, it would take time for the army to move forward, and the church's attacks were too quick. The situation instantly went out of control. "How many troops do we have?" St. Lorenzo came to his senses and immediately asked the generals. Now that things had come to this, he knew that there was no point in pursuing the matter of the senior colonel. The Holy Church now had sufficient reason to attack, and the attack was already in front of them. The only thing they should do now was to defend and defeat the Holy Church. As for the rest, they could only wait for the war to end and then use other ways to modify it. Reporting to the commander, the 1st Legion is on standby. The 2nd Legion's 1st Division, 2nd Division, and 5th Division are on standby. A burly general with a 5-star epaulet immediately said. The other generals looked dignified, knowing that the war had finally begun. Although in name, they were at a disadvantage. In terms of war, they had a great advantage. It would not be difficult to take down the Holy Church. All troops immediately move out and block the Holy Knights. St. Lorenzo immediately said. Next to him, Bryson's face was gloomy. Richelieu and the Great Light King are a bit tricky. I will go personally. Damn the Holy Church. It has been too long since they made a move. Do they really think that our military region is a pushover? With that, he got up and strode away. A few generals in charge of the divisions immediately stood up and followed behind him. St. Lorenzo did not stop them. After all the generals had left, he said to the remaining generals and staff officers, "The Holy Church has come prepared this time. From the current situation, it seems that all of this is a conspiracy of the Holy Church. The excuse for attacking us is too well prepared. They must have planned this for a long time. This attack will not be so simple. Although Richelieu is the Pope, before he became the Pope, he was the #1 person in the Holy Church. His power is unparalleled. Now that he is working together with the Great Light King, relying on numbers alone may not be effective. Does anyone have any plans? Lord Commander, in my opinion, one of them will definitely lead a dagger team to break out of the encirclement and attack our headquarters. Otherwise, they will not be able to compete with us with just their military strength." An old staff officer with small eyes said, "We can set up an ambush in advance. Outside our headquarters, we can send a poisonous vanguard team to defend. Even if Richelieu can break through the defense of the vanguard team, he will be seriously injured and will not be a threat. Lord Commander, I think we should let Ghost Dragon kill Richelieu on the spot and then counterattack the Holy Church." Another staff officer who was about 60 years old said in a cold voice, "Now that the Holy Church has won the hearts of the people, they will attack us in the name of judging the dark believers. If we lose, then we will have nothing. The military will be reduced to a puppet of the Holy Church like the Temple of Elements. We can only completely destroy the Holy Church. Although the reputation of the Holy Church is not good, but power can suppress all rebellious voices." "I agree," another one said. St. Lorenzo frowned as he listened to their words. "Ghost Dragon is violent, and we can't completely control him. If he takes the opportunity to run away, Lord Commander." The old staff officer from before said, "If we let Ghost Dragon take action, we can promise him that as long as he helps us destroy the Vatican, we will grant him freedom." St. Lorenzo looked at him and pondered for a moment. Immediately, send someone to find Ghost Dragon and ask if he agrees. Yes. A general immediately ordered the young captain who was waiting outside the conference hall. Commander, should we ask for reinforcements from the inner wall? Another staff officer said in a worried tone. It is strange that the Holy Church handed over the position of Pope and sent troops to us. Don't you think it's a bit strange? If all of this is controlled by the forces of the Holy Church in the inner wall, then I'm afraid that there are masters of the inner wall mixed in with the knights of the church. If that is the case, then even if we let Ghost Dragon, everyone's face changed as they heard his words. Chapter 656. Your Majesty, the Great Light King has invaded the military region. The military is retreating, but the troops from the other divisions are rushing over. The Great Light King is worried that they will surround the military region. He is asking for reinforcements. A deacon of the church hurriedly ran over and reported to Barton from the Divine Temple at the top of Mount Wutoa. Barton was sitting on the throne with a scepter in his hand. He said, I know. Send a message to him. The reinforcements will arrive soon. Yes. The deacon was ready to retreat. Barton asked, Have the craftsmen arrived? The deacon was startled. He didn't know why the Pope would ask about such a trivial matter at such a critical moment. He replied, Your Majesty, the craftsmen that you have invited have arrived. They're in the church at the foot of the mountain. Tell them to come up and get ready to start work. Barton said, Yes. The deacon replied. After he retreated, Barton immediately got up and walked quickly to the inner hall behind the throne. At a glance, he saw Dean sitting in front of the desk, quietly drawing something, and the beautiful woman who seemed to never leave his side. Barton's eyes glanced at the woman's almost perfect figure, then quickly turned away. He respectfully said to Dean, Master, the craftsmen have arrived. Dean nodded. Wait for them to come. Tell them to modify according to the drawings I gave you. Yes, Barton answered and looked up at him. Young master, aren't you here? I'm going to the military region. Dean put the pen on the shelf next to him. He looked at Barton. I'll leave this place to you. Barton was startled. Master, the military region is in chaos. Will it be too dangerous for you to go? Do you want the remaining cardinals to protect you? No need. Dean got up and put on his coat. The war will be over by the time I get there. Barton said, But I heard from the spies that the other divisions of the military are rushing there. Even if the Great Light King and Lord Richelieu, when they will be surrounded by them. If your head is cut off, what can you do even if your body is strong? Dean looked at him with a teaching look. Barton woke up. On the vast plain of the military headquarters, the sounds of battle could be heard for hundreds of miles. The Paladin army, led by the Great Light King, Pulo, was like a snow-white wave sweeping in the direction of the military headquarters buildings. There was a small river in front of these buildings, and a sandbag fortress had been built on the other side of the river. The military's most powerful war weapon, the God's Cannon, was set up behind the fortress and aimed at the Paladin army. There was a neat formation of soldiers behind the barrier. Each soldier was equipped with a legendary steam rifle that Dean had given to the military. All the soldiers were staring at the army of knights. They saw the green grassland being engulfed by the army of knights. All the cannons were fired as they entered the firing range. The cannons were like meteors as they shot towards the army of knights. A loud explosion sounded, and countless holy knights and their horses were blasted into pieces. Holy shield formation. Pu Luo took the lead and roared at the sky. His voice spread to tens of thousands of troops. The army of knights in the front immediately raised their golden shields and placed them on top of their heads. The cannons smashed down and exploded a big pit, but the number of casualties was immediately reduced by more than half. In the blink of an eye, Pu Luo had led the army to the front of the barrier. They galloped through the small river and splashed countless water. The soldiers of the military behind the barrier roared and rushed forward to meet the attack. Bang, bang, bang. The bullets from the steam rifle quickly pierced through the horses and the knights. However, some knights who were further away were hit by the bullets, but still rushed forward. The range and power of the steam rifle couldn't be compared with the rifles of the old era. The armors of the army of knights were the best quality war armors in the outer wall. They were extremely hard and could only be hit at close range. In the blink of an eye, the two armies had fallen into a melee. "I'm going to capture the king." Richelieu roared at Poulot and called for a cardinal behind him to lead thousands of light cavalry. They took the lead and charged into the army. Their momentum was unstoppable as they tore open a gap and rushed towards the military headquarters building at the back of the army. Poulot was anxious when he saw that Richelieu was alone. He roared and waved his axe to kill the soldiers. Under the cover of Poulot, the light cavalry led by Richelieu broke through the defense of the soldiers. Some generals of the military saw that the situation wasn't right and led the heavy armored soldiers to stop them. However, they were beheaded by Richelieu. The generals of the military had the strength of senior hunters and had rich combat experience. But in front of Richelieu, they were no different from ordinary soldiers. Under his lead, thousands of light cavalry pierced into the heavy armored troops and instantly tore them in half. They rushed straight to the front of the military headquarters building complex. Kill. Richelieu's face was stained with blood. The battle he hadn't fought for a long time had made his blood boil. The sounds of fighting in his ears were like war drums, raising his fighting spirit. He took the lead and jumped onto the steps of a building. He quickly cut down the soldiers who came to stop him and rushed in first. Die! An armored general rushed out of the courtyard. His eyes were red as he roared and rushed towards Richelieu with a spear. Richelieu leaped off his warhorse and landed directly where the spear of the general was thrusting at him. At the same time, he grabbed the spear with his hand and grabbed it. Using the momentum, he leaped forward and kicked the general in the chest. With a loud thud, the general spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes were wide open and his face was filled with disbelief. His body flew backward and slammed into the wall behind him, causing it to collapse. Richelieu didn't stop and rushed towards the military headquarters meeting hall building. Along the way, there were soldiers who came to stop him. Most of them were the ace soldiers of the military, the Purple Feather Army. Every Purple Feather Army soldier had a purple feather stuck in their helmet. It was extremely eye-catching. But in front of Richelieu, they were all killed in an instant. Cardinal Elnarin, who was following behind Richelieu, was already stunned. Although he knew that his master's strength was unfathomable, he didn't expect him to be so strong. He could gallop freely in the military headquarters and come out unscathed. With a bang, a Purple Feather Army soldier was kicked away by Richelieu. The soldier crashed into the door of the military headquarters meeting hall, knocking it open. In the meeting hall, St. Lorenzo and the remaining generals, as well as the chief of staff, were all shocked. They didn't expect the enemy to attack so quickly. One of the chief of staff hurriedly said, "What happened outside?" "Sir, the enemy has attacked." A captain hurriedly ran over to report. St. Lorenzo's face was full of shock. "Who is it, Poulot?" "It's the old pope," the captain said in a panic. "He's too strong. No one could stop him." General Cote was killed the moment he went up. St. Lorenzo was stunned. The other chief of staff widened their eyes, their faces full of shock. "Commander." One of the chief of staff came back to his senses and hurriedly looked at St. Lorenzo. St. Lorenzo knew what he meant and immediately said, "Quick, let Ghost Dragon attack." "I'll go too," one of the generals said and quickly ran out of the hall. Richelieu led Elnarin and the remaining hundreds of light cavalry to break through the door of the military headquarters meeting hall. They cut down the soldiers who came to stop them one by one. Richelieu already saw a few red figures in the meeting hall in front of him. One of them had the most intense heat source, like a fireball. He knew that it was the old man from St. Lorenzo. Just as he was about to step forward, he suddenly felt a dangerous aura coming from the corridor next to him. He turned his head and suddenly saw a black figure with disheveled hair and tattered clothes rushing towards him at high speed. He was shocked and hurriedly jumped up to meet it, lest his horse get hurt. Bang! He kicked out and suddenly fell as if he had kicked an iron plate. He looked down and saw that the ragged figure that looked like a beggar had grabbed his ankle. With a swoosh, The beggar figure swung his arm and fell down. Richelieu's body slammed into the floor of the corridor like a hammer, smashing through the floor and covering him with sawdust. Before the beggar could swing him again, Richelieu's other leg lashed out, striking the beggar squarely in the chest. With a grunt, the beggar let go of Richelieu's hand and took several steps back. Richelieu took the opportunity to put some distance between them and looked over. The beggar figure rubbed his chest and grimaced in pain. His face that was covered by his disheveled hair showed some shock. High-level limitless, the military really hit it well. Richelieu narrowed his eyes slightly and slowly pulled out the sharp sword on his back. He took a deep breath and the blood in his body moved slightly. The magic mark at the end of his spine was immediately stimulated. His flaxen hair immediately became moist again and became a bright golden color. The wrinkles on his face also disappeared quickly, and he returned to the appearance of a man in his 30s. His facial features were clear and handsome, and there was not a single wrinkle on his skin. Swoosh! He exerted strength in his feet and suddenly rushed out. The beggar looked at Richelieu's transformation with a serious expression on his face. With a low growl, the bones in his body began to move violently. His body twisted slightly in a strange posture, and the next moment, sharp white bone spikes began to grow out of his forehead, elbows, and the end of his spine. He lay on the ground like a lizard, swaying his body. As Richelieu pounced on him, the beggar charged forward. Swoosh! He waved his sharp claws and slashed at Richelieu's chest. The sword in Richelieu's hand flashed and blocked his palm. However, the moment he blocked it, he saw a white spike coming at him from the side. He hurriedly slammed his palm on the ground and rolled over to avoid the white spike. He then stabbed his sword at the beggar figure. The beggar figure reacted quickly and quickly dodged the attack. He jumped up and landed on the dome of the corridor. His fingers dug into the sawdust, and he swooped down. Richelieu's face darkened, and he swung his sword to block. Chapter 657. Looking at Elnorin and the group of holy knights behind him, the chiefs of staff on both sides of the conference table were in an uproar. They nervously retreated to St. Lorenz's side. St. Lorenz's face was gloomy. He stepped out of the crowd and pulled out his great sword from the weapon rack beside him. Elnorin looked down at St. Lorenza and said, "Commander, get ready to be captured." Just as he said that, St. Lorenza suddenly rushed towards him with his sword in hand. He was as fast as a white pigeon, his great sword humming in the air. Elnorin's expression changed. He hurriedly retreated and called for the holy knights to stop him. With a few bangs, St. Lorenza raised his hand and slapped. The charging holy knights flew back at an even faster speed, crashing into the holy knights behind them. Immediately, a large number of them fell. Elnorin saw that the situation was not good and quickly turned to escape. Bang, bang, bang. 7 or 8 holy knights were thrown out of the hall and smashed into the indoor bonsai outside the hall. St. Lorenza held his sword in one hand and stood at the entrance of the hall, looking coldly at the many holy knights outside. His silver hair fluttered in the wind, and his aura completely overshadowed the hundreds of light knights. Elnorin looked at him in shock and anger. He did not expect the old St. Lorenza to still have such strength. Bang! Bang! In the corridor next to him, Richelieu and the beggar were fighting fiercely, tearing the corridor apart. Richelieu heard the commotion next to him and glanced over. He suddenly saw St. Lorenza standing at the entrance of the hall with a sword in his hand. A large number of holy knights had fallen in front of him. At the same time, outside the building behind him, there were faint sounds of fighting. It seemed that the army outside had surrounded them. "I can't delay any longer." His eyes were cold. He raised his hand to block the beggar's attack and leaped back. He knew that the battle between the army led by Prolo and the army of the military would not be decided in a short time, but the army of the military could take the opportunity to send some reinforcements here. The longer he delayed, the more disadvantageous it would be for him, and it might even lead to the failure of the mission. He took a deep breath and suddenly exerted his strength, shooting towards the beggar's figure like an arrow. The beggar was shocked. With a low growl, Bone spikes protruded from his arms as he tried to grab Richelieu. With a clanging sound, the sword in Richelieu's hand flashed, and he deflected the beggar's arm. His body suddenly moved, and in an instant, 3 Richelieus appeared, stabbing at him from 3 different directions. The beggar's face was full of shock as he hurriedly retreated out of the range of the sword light. Richelieu followed up with another attack. His sword flashed like the wind, each strike deadly, forcing the beggar's silhouette to retreat. "Die!" Richelieu growled. The veins on his arms bulged as he slashed down with his sword. Just like before, the beggar raised his hand to block, but as soon as he touched the long sword, he felt that something was wrong. When he wanted to withdraw his hand, it was already too late. With a cracking sound, the sword light cut through the bone spurs on his arm and went down. The sharp tip of the sword stabbed straight into his chest, leaving a huge wound, and blood spurted out. Richelieu lifted his foot and kicked the beggar's stomach as he chased after the beggar again. At the entrance of the hall, Saint Lorenzo was dealing with the paladins in front of him while paying attention to the battle. He was shocked to see that Richelieu was able to suppress the ghost dragon. The ghost dragon was a senior limitless in the inner wall. Even in the inner wall where there were many strong people, he was considered as one of the top masters. How could he not be able to defeat Richelieu? Ernolin also saw the change in the situation. He immediately shouted for the paladins to stop Saint Lorenzo in case he rushed over to support the ghost dragon. Moments later, with a blood-curdling scream, Richelieu rushed out of the broken corridor with his blood-stained sword, heading straight for San Lorenzo. Saint Lorenzo was taken aback. He glanced at the ruins from the corner of his eyes, but there was no movement inside. His heart sank. He swung his sword and cut a paladin in half. He shouted at Richelieu, "Do you really want to do this?" What answered him was Richelieu's sharp sword that came straight at him. Saint Lorenzo's face was full of anger as he tried to resist. He felt a huge force as his sword touched Richelieu's sword. He felt numb and almost let go of the sword. After Richelieu landed on the ground, he turned around and circled behind Saint Lorenzo like a ghost. He used his arm to lock Saint Lorenzo's throat and control his upper body. At the same time, he put his knee on Saint Lorenzo's spine. With just a little bit of force, he could break Saint Lorenzo's body. "You have lost. Stop," Richelieu said in a low voice. Saint Lorenzo clenched his teeth. He wanted to swing his sword, but his arm was numb. The sword that was originally light, as if nothing had become incomparably heavy at the moment. He knew that he had lost. He said in grief, "Aren't you afraid of causing chaos? You want to rule our military region? Have you asked the military headquarters in the inner wall? Will they agree?" Richelieu was unmoved and said, "Pass down the order immediately. Tell your subordinates to stop fighting and surrender. You've lost. Don't create any more killing and sacrifices." Saint Lorenzo was so angry that he laughed. "Slaughter? Sacrifice? Haven't you made enough of them? Do you really think that just because you can control me, you can control the tens of thousands of soldiers in the military? They will never surrender. They will never bow their heads to you." Richelieu coldly replied, "Then don't blame me." With that, he grabbed his shoulder and twisted it violently. With a crack, his arm was broken. Then, he dragged his body back into the hall. Ernie led the other paladins to enter the hall. They occupied every part of the hall and beheaded all the attendants who tried to resist. Only the chiefs of staff and honorary generals were left behind. "Take off his clothes." Richelieu suddenly pointed to an honorary general. Ernolin immediately sent someone to take him down and take off his coat. "Find someone to change into it. Immediately order them to stop fighting and surrender," Richelieu said in a cold voice. Ernie couldn't help but look at Richelieu. He didn't expect Richelieu to think of such a strange method. Saint Lorenzo and the other chiefs of staff were shocked and angry. Saint Lorenzo angrily said, "Old Pope, you are too despicable. You forced me to do this." Richelieu coldly looked at him. Soon a paladin put on the honorary general's armor and ran out of the building. It didn't take long for the sound of fighting to die down. Saint Lorenzo closed his eyes in pain when he heard the change. Although he could not see the battle outside, his hearing was very sensitive. As the sound of fighting weakened, he also heard the cheers getting louder and louder. The content of the cheers was "Long live the Pope." Obviously, the Knights of the Church won. The other chiefs of staff had ugly expressions on their faces. They were so angry that they looked as if they had eaten charcoal. They knew that the generals and soldiers who had stopped fighting outside were probably even more devastated than they were. A carriage with the flag of a cardinal of the church on it sped through the streets at full speed. The passers-by on the streets saw the flag on the carriage and avoided it in fear, not daring to stop it. After a moment, the carriage came to a stop outside the military headquarters. Dean opened the door and got off the carriage. He looked at the towering courtyard wall in front of him. The coldness in his eyes faded a bit. "Master, it seems very quiet inside," Sergei, who was the coachman, said to Dean as he jumped down from the carriage. "Quiet is good news." Dean took Aisha's hand and strode inside. There was a vast grassy plain after entering the courtyard wall. There were several rampart-like buildings in front of the plain. There were sentry towers, arrow towers, training grounds, and camps. It didn't take long for Dean to see a lot of corpses and blood staining the plain. Chapter 658. It didn't take long for Dean to see a team of paladins standing by the river in front of the plain. The sun shined on their silver-gray armor and reflected the dazzling light. He saw a red-robed figure in front of the team of paladins. It was Cardinal Elnarin, who was next to Richelieu. "Elder." Ernolin trotted in front of Dean and immediately jumped down from the horse's back. He bowed and saluted. He was one of the few people in the Holy Church who knew the real inside story. He didn't dare to treat Dean as a genius. "Let's go." Dean didn't ask anything. "Yes," Elnarin replied respectfully. He was surprised as he looked at Dean's appearance. It seemed that Dean knew the situation inside out. Lorenzo was sitting on a chair in the conference hall. Two knights were holding their swords to his throat. The other commander, Bryson, didn't have such good treatment. He was personally taken care of by Pulo. He was kneeling on the ground. His hair was messy, and there were many scars on his body. His armor was broken. He was captured by Pulo after the armistice. This was the first time he fought against the nominal number one person in the outer wall. The latter's strength was beyond his imagination. He didn't even have the chance to escape from the enemy. "It's useless even if you capture us." Lorenzo gritted his teeth and stared at Richelieu. "Commander Zidane will soon bring troops to encircle this place. She has 10 times more troops than you. Coupled with the steam rifle, it's enough to flatten this place. You won't be able to escape." Richelieu sat on a general's chair and said indifferently, "With you guys here, do you think you would dare to attack?" "Hey," Lorenzo sneered. "Don't think that you can force them to retreat by using us as hostages. In the current situation, she will kill you along with us. That's the best result. The military and the Holy Church will see her as the king. Do you think she will be soft-hearted in the face of such a big temptation? Just wait to be buried with us." Richelieu slightly frowned as he looked at Pulo, who was next to him. Pulo thought for a moment. "Elder, why don't we retreat first and capture them at Mount Wutal? With the help of the terrain, there we can certainly defend against them." Richelieu's eyes flashed as he hesitated. "What's the matter that's making you so distressed?" Suddenly, a clear voice came from outside. Everyone was startled and couldn't help but look outside. Cardinal Norin slowly walked into the hall with 3 figures. When they saw the face of the young man behind Norin, St. Lorenzo and the other generals and staff officers were stunned, their faces filled with astonishment. Richelieu was startled as he saw Dean come in person. He was relieved as his heart settled down. He got up and greeted, "Master, you have come." As soon as these words were spoken, the hall instantly fell silent. St. Lorenzo opened his mouth wide and stared at Richelieu in shock, wondering if he was hallucinating. "Young master?" And he even used honorifics to address you respectfully? Bryson, who was kneeling on the ground, and the rest of the defeated generals looked at this scene in disbelief. They couldn't wrap their heads around it. How could the leader of the Holy Church be so respectful to this genius in divine arts? Prowl, who was pressing down on Bryson, was equally shocked as he looked at Richelieu in confusion. Dean patted Richelieu's shoulder. "You've worked hard. Are you hurt?" Richelieu was startled, but quickly responded, "No, it's just a small scratch." He put away the cut on the back of his hand. Dean's eyes were sharp. He looked at Ernolin. "The old pontiff is injured. Why didn't you bandage him?" Elnorin was shocked. "I'll call the priest." He saw that Dean didn't stop him, so he immediately turned and ran out. Dean took Richelieu's hand and came to the hall. He passed by Bryson, who was kneeling on the ground, and other generals. He didn't even glance at them. Dean helped Richelieu to sit down on the chair. He looked at Lorenzo, who was sitting on another chair. "Old commander, long time no see. How are you?" He waved his hand as he spoke. The two knights who were holding St. Lorenzo looked at Dean in confusion. They looked at Richelieu, who was next to him. Richelieu nodded to them. Both of them loosened their grip on their swords. One of them carefully reminded Dean, "Master, be careful." Lorenzo looked at Dean in a daze. Dean's attitude and Richelieu's performance made him unable to see the boy as a simple master. Moreover, it was a historical moment of life and death for the Holy Church and the military. How can a master come here and waste time? Dean pulled a chair from the side and sat next to St. Lorenzo. He saw that Elnorin had come with two priests. As soon as the priest arrived, he bowed and immediately checked Richelieu's wound to prevent infection. St. Lorenzo stared at Dean, who was sitting next to him. "Mr. Dean, we have a friendship in the past. Can you talk to the old pontiff and ask him to withdraw his troops? Otherwise, we will all die here when Commander Skydon attacks." Dean looked at him in surprise, then shook his head. "Old commander, you are really confused. How can I help you? It was my idea to take over your military region." St. Lorenzo was stunned. "You have indeed treated me well when it comes to friendship." Dean slowly said, "You immediately blocked the news of me when I was arrested by the inner wall. The people would have forgotten about my existence if I had come out later. I didn't expect the friendship price to be so low. Not only did I not get any help from the military, but you stepped on my foot." St. Lorenzo's face turned ugly. "There is a misunderstanding. Listen to me. You don't need to explain." Dean waved his hand. "The war will be over when Commander Skydon comes. I can go back to work then." Bryson was kneeling on the ground. "Do you really want to perish together with us? Commander Skydon won't let you go." Dean glanced at him. "Kneeling people don't deserve to talk to me." Bryson's body trembled in anger. St. Lorenzo suppressed his anger. "Mr. Dean, why do we have to kill each other? You are also a member of the Holy Church. Don't you have any compassion?" "It's all used up," Dean said. "If you have any, then take the initiative to surrender. By the way, persuade Skydon to surrender. From now on, the military will be loyal to the Holy Church. Be loyal to me." Lorenzo was stunned. He couldn't help but look at Richelieu and Dean. "Loyal to you?" Bryson and other staff officers who were kneeling on the ground were shocked. They thought that Dean had instigated the Pope to attack them. If that was the case, then Dean's words were too presumptuous. "Are you stupid, or are you looking down on me?" Dean indifferently said, "Is there any problem with being loyal to me?" He noticed that Richelieu had a matter-of-fact look on his face. Suddenly, he thought of the honorifics and the way Richelieu addressed Dean. An incredible conclusion came to his mind. Dean was the real power behind the Holy Church. He immediately thought that Dean had been taken to the inner wall before. It was possible that Dean had gotten something from the inner wall. Perhaps he had been appreciated by a certain force and had made a leap in his cultivation. Although the possibility was low, but it wasn't impossible. "What is your relationship with the Pope?" He looked at Dean in bewilderment. Duddian didn't pay attention to such a boring question. Chapter 659. So fast. Puluo was surprised. Bryson and the other generals' eyes lit up as they heard Dudion's words. They were finally saved. Although St. Lorenzo had said that they would be killed along with Richelieu and the others. But they knew that St. Lorenzo was deliberately trying to intimidate the Holy Church. If St. Lorenzo really did, so then there was only one consequence. He would be obliterated by the military. "I'll stop the enemy." Puluo looked at Duddian and asked Richelieu for instructions. Richelieu didn't respond as he looked at Duddian. He was waiting for his decision. "It's finally here." Dudien's eyes lit up. Pontiff, I'll leave everything here to you. I'll be right back. Richelieu was startled. I'll go with you. No need, Richelieu said as he saw Dadian walk out of the hall. Puluo, give the token to Mr. Dean. Puluo couldn't help but ask, are you going to hand over the holy cavalry to him? Dean interrupted Richelieu. No need. There is no need to be so troublesome. There are enough casualties. He took Aisha out of the hall. Sergei was the only one following them. Sergei looked back at Richelieu and the other generals in the hall. Master, where are we going? The enemy is coming. Of course we're going to kill them. Dadian replied without looking back. Sergei was dumbfounded. Kill the enemy? Are we going to rely on the three of us? Of course not. Sergei was relieved after hearing Dadian's words. But the next sentence almost scared him. I'll do it alone. Dean had come to the plain outside. He stood on a high slope and quietly looked ahead. He saw the army of knights and the surrendered army stationed in the front of the defensive line. There was a faint black line at the end of the plain outside the defensive line. Sergei looked ahead and saw the rolling black lines gradually become clear. There were countless black heads moving in the distance. Sergei swallowed his saliva as he felt his heart beating wildly. Even though he had the strength of a senior hunter, he still felt an unbearable pressure in the face of countless soldiers. Young master, are you kidding me? Sergei felt as if something was stuck in his throat. He was so nervous that his muscles tightened. Let's let the holy cavalry go. They should be able to resist. Cold weapon warfare is great. It produces a fierce general who can change the situation by himself. Dadian didn't pay attention to Sergei's words. He whispered to Haisha, you wait for me here. I'll be back soon. Haisha was expressionless as she indifferently looked at the front. It seemed that she wasn't afraid of the incoming army. She didn't care about the danger that Dadian was about to face. Dadian turned to Sergei. Take care of her. Don't let anyone get close to her. Sergei hurried to ask Dadian to stay. Master, we have so many people. Why do you have to fight alone? It's dangerous. Because of efficiency, Dadian said. Sergei was stunned. Dadian took off the black fur coat and handed it to Sergei. He pulled out the dark steel sword from his waist and jumped down the high slope. He rushed towards the black army outside the defensive line. Sergei was startled. Suddenly, he heard the sound of armor rubbing against each other. He turned around and saw Richelieu and Pullo escorting St. Lorenzo, Bryson, and other military officers. Where is he? Richelieu asked Sergei as he didn't see Dadian. Sergei wryly smiled. Young master is going to fight. Fight? Richelieu was stunned. Pullo, who was next to Sergei, said, he is a master of invention. Why is he going to fight? Is he tired of living? Why didn't you stop him? How many people did he lead to fight? How can he mobilize the holy cavalry without my permission? Sergei glanced at him. Remembering his identity as the Great Light King, he held back the anger in his heart and didn't bother to respond to him. Pullo didn't think that a little attendant would dare to look at him. He was about to rebuke Sergei, but was stopped by Richelieu. Richelieu stood in front of the high slope and looked at the two camps of holy cavalry and surrendered army. He found that the two armies were motionless and there was no trace of chaos. The next moment, with his long-range vision, he suddenly saw a black figure charging out from the direction of the defense line. It leaped out of the defense line and ran toward the surging black tide on the other side of the plain. What? Richelieu was so shocked that his tongue almost trembled. He is alone. Hearing this, Puluo, who was next to him, was instantly stunned. He raised his head and looked over. His gaze quickly saw an incomparably tiny black figure rapidly moving forward on the plains. He couldn't help but be dumbfounded. St. Lorenzo, Bryson, and the others who were being held at the back were stunned for a moment. They could not help but struggle to stand up and look forward. One of the old staff officers ignored them and sneered, "Fighting alone? What kind of joke is this? It's not called fighting, it's more like suicide. Does he think he's a god who could defeat the army brought by Commander Hidovan alone? Ridiculous." Just as he said this, a burly general beside him suddenly exclaimed, He went up alone." The old staff officer was stunned. "Isn't there the holy cavalry?" Why is he going to fight alone? Richelieu couldn't help but ask Sergei. In his impression, Dean had always been cautious and liked to hide in the dark to order others around. However, the current situation was one where even the brave generals didn't dare to take the lead in the battle. But Dean was the only one who was willing to go to the front. Sergei's face was bitter. Young master said that it's efficient. Efficient? Richelieu was stunned. Whoosh, whoosh. The deafening roar shook his eardrums, and his heartbeat accelerated uncontrollably. He clenched his sword, and his pupils changed. The black tide in front of him suddenly turned into a red scourge. The heat of countless figures glued together. In this red scourge, there were 7 or 8 figures emitting heat like fireballs. They should be the generals of the army. Dean's eyes turned and quickly found 3 figures that were more vigorous than the fireball. 2 of them were standing together, and the other one was on the left side of the army. He thought for a moment and locked his eyes on the 2 figures that were standing together. It was impossible to judge the specific position of the other heat sources in the crowd by using thermal vision alone. But Dean's vision wasn't thermal vision, but X-ray vision. He could easily lock the position of each heat source in the crowd. Charles noticed a person rushing out of the defensive line and immediately raised his hand to order the entire army to slow down. Soon, he saw the person's appearance clearly. He was wearing a strange black armor. It was not the military armor, nor was it the silver-gray armor of the Order's knights. He could not help but frown and shouted, "Who is it?" Dean narrowed his eyes as he looked at the army that was gradually coming to a halt. He didn't pay attention to the general's shouts. His feet suddenly exerted force as he used the dragon blood technique to control the flow of blood in his body. The power of magic marks surged out from his chest, and his whole body was covered with snow-white bones. He clenched his sword and rushed towards the general like a gray sword. Charles looked at Dean's sudden increase in speed and was shocked. He hurriedly shouted, "Get ready to meet the enemy. Heavy armor, get into formation. Archers shoot." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The archers released the arrows that had been prepared for a long time. Arrows rained down from the sky and fell on the plain in front of Dean. Dean didn't dodge, but rushed straight to the front. He waved the sword in his hand and quickly split the arrows that were falling from the sky. With his wide field of vision of 270 degrees, all the arrows that were aimed at his body were blocked one by one. Whoosh! After he broke away from the arrows, he leaped into the air and leaped over the heavy shields of the heavily armored soldiers. The height of his leap was so high that even the knights' spears that were piercing through the shields could not reach him. Charles was horrified. Even other generals couldn't do such a skill. He pulled out his sword and waved it forward. He roared, "Trap the beast formation! Kill!" Thousands of cavalry rushed out from the army behind him. The sound of hooves was like a torrent. They surrounded Dean in 3 layers and then tightened the encirclement to the center. Dean's eyes were indifferent. He didn't stop at all. He rushed forward and suddenly attacked. His palm grabbed the front leg of a knight's horse, and the other hand waved his sword to block the knight's spear. He roared fiercely, and the strong horse let out a mournful cry. Unexpectedly, it was pulled by Dean and danced. The knight on the back of the horse was tied by the rope, so he didn't fall. But it was difficult to attack when the horse was dancing. Get lost! Dean turned a few laps and suddenly smashed into the encirclement in front of him. Whoosh! The horse rushed out like a black cannonball. It instantly broke through 4 or 5 cavalry. The knight on the back of the horse vomited blood and died on the spot. Dean stepped on the body of the horse and rushed forward. He turned the sword in his hand and cut off the heads of 2 cavalrymen. He didn't stop, but retreated back to the army to kill the general who had previously given the order. Damn! Stop him! Charles looked at the beast formation that was easily torn by Dean. He was so angry that his face changed color. There was some panic in his heart. He could feel that the murderous intent of the teenager was directed at him. Whoosh! Dean stepped on the head of the cavalry and rushed all the way forward. In the blink of an eye, he came in front of the general who was riding on the horse. Die! Charles was shocked and angry. He clenched his teeth and rushed forward. Dean's eyes were indifferent. His body suddenly sped up and his wrists shook. The moment the two crossed each other, blood sputtered and splashed on Dean's cheek. At the same time, a head flew up. Chapter 660. General Charles. Two of Charles's trusted attendants saw this unbelievable scene. They roared in grief and indignation and rushed toward Dean with their guns. Dean didn't pay attention to them. He stepped on the shoulder of a knight and used the momentum to move towards the back of the knight. Kill! Kill! Stop him! The three generals in the rear saw Dean beheading Charles. They were incomparably shocked and angry. They didn't expect that there would be such a brave person in the enemy. Moreover, they didn't expect that this person would despise them so much. He dared to break into the enemy alone. It was simply unforgivable. Under the command of the three generals, the army quickly dispersed. Archers and musketeers retreated to both sides. Light cavalry and heavy armored soldiers outflanked from the side and took the initiative to attack Dean. In the case of close combat, archers and musketeers were useless. They would only hurt their own people. Dean was the only one who had broken through the army. Their newly established strongest regiment, the firearm regiment, was completely useless. Whoosh! Dean flew through the army. His feet did not touch the ground. He stepped on the shoulders of the knights along the way and swept forward. He was like a dragonfly skimming on the water, or like a butterfly. His movements were light and agile without the slightest bit of sloppiness. These knights raised their spears to stab Dean. With the impact of the cavalry, the destructive power of the spears increased to the strongest. But Dean's speed was too fast. He stepped on the heads of their horses or stepped on the spears. It seemed that he could borrow any physical substance. In the blink of an eye, he rushed hundreds of meters away without the slightest pause or the slightest injury. The three generals, senior colonels, and captains in the surroundings were all astonished to see this scene. What kind of aura and power was this? He was actually able to come and go as he pleased in the midst of an army of tens of thousands of men and horses, completely unscathed. Dudian looked straight ahead. There was a kind of disdain in his eyes. He was tired of everything in the world. Anyone who saw his eyes would tremble with fear, awe, and submission. He was holding a 3 feet long dark steel sword as he rushed forward. All the spears, sharp blades, swords were unable to hurt his snow-white bones. The ugly and ferocious skeleton-like appearance firmly wrapped his body and protected it tightly. In the center of the army, Sidon was wearing an exquisite bronze battle skirt, which accentuated her slender and plump figure. Coupled with her snow-white skin, she looked extremely dazzling and gorgeous. She was not only the only woman among the three commanders, but also the goddess in the hearts of all the officers and soldiers in the military region. Her dark brown eyes were like the eyes of an eagle, taking in the chaos that had suddenly arisen at the front lines. She also saw the pitch-black figure holding a sword and charging into the army. She frowned slightly, suddenly feeling that this person's face was somewhat familiar. It's him. Sidowin finally remembered. There was a trace of surprise on her face. Isn't this person an architect? How can he be so strong? Commander, do you recognize this person? A 5-star general next to her was surprised. His vision couldn't see the details of the turmoil in the front. He could only see the general situation. You know this person. He is the young master who gave us the legendary item for free. Sidowin stared at the turmoil. Her brows wrinkled more and more. Are you talking about the magic master called Do Something? The 5-star general couldn't help but be stunned. Judging from the turmoil in the front, the strength of the person wouldn't be lower than him. How could such an existence be the young architect? Sidowin stared at the battlefield. She was not in the mood to talk to him. She saw Dudian rushing all the way. His speed was extremely fast. The light cavalry and heavy guards couldn't stop him at all. She could clearly see that the person was coming towards her. Obviously, his purpose was to kill her. He came alone to kill her in the middle of thousands of troops. She felt scared and shocked as she thought about it. Was this the thinking of a normal person? What gave him so much courage? Why haven't you taken him down yet? Didn't you say that he was alone? A 5-star general said to a colonel knight next to the chariot. Give me the telescope. The Colonel Knight immediately took out the telescope and handed it to the general. The five-star general raised his eyes to look, and the blurry scene in front of him immediately became clear. He saw a young man dressed in black armor, holding a dark bronze longsword, stepping on the knight's shoulder as if he was walking on flat ground. Along the way, countless soldiers thrust their spears or brandished their swords in an attempt to stop him, but they were easily dodged. Occasionally, the swords that struck his feet were blocked by his metal boots, not causing him any damage. How was it possible? The five-star general was stunned. He had thought that the newcomer had already been surrounded by the army and was struggling in pain. However, the situation was completely different from what he had imagined. Not only was the newcomer not surrounded by the army, he even treated the army like a field of grass that he could trample on as he pleased, using them as stepping stones. He put down the telescope and scolded the Colonel Knight next to him. "What the hell are you doing? How are you going to fight if the holy cavalry is behind him?" The Colonel Knight's mouth was bitter. He knew that the people in front couldn't take down the enemy. What could he do? Blame me? He naturally didn't dare to take the blame. Subordinates will immediately dispatch the Purple Feather Army to encircle the enemy. Go! The five-star general roared. The Colonel Cavalry General hurriedly accepted the order and rode out. Whoosh! Dudian flew all the way. Suddenly he saw that the army in front of the commander's chariot was divided into two sides. There were purple knights with fluttering purple feathers on their helmets. It was the famous Purple Feather Army of the military. It was the trump card of the military that had made the barbarians suffer countless hardships. It was also the trump card of the military that made the nobles fear them. Dudian narrowed his eyes, but didn't stop as he continued to rush forward. He could tell at a glance that the body heat of the Purple Feather Army was more than 5 times that of the ordinary soldiers. They were almost the same as the primary hunters, although the primary hunters were very weak compared to his current strength. But the army of thousands of primary hunters was no less than a scourge. It must be known that the 6 consortiums didn't have more than 2,000 primary hunters. This was the absolute strength of the military. Clatter! As soon as he got close to the Purple Feather Army, Dudian heard the jingling sound of chains. He saw the vanguard suddenly raise a black net to cover him in midair. Dudian quickly swung his sword. Whoosh! The dark steel sword stabbed the black net. The friction created fierce sparks, but it couldn't cut the black net. A net made of alloy? A cold light flashed in Dean's eyes, and he immediately abandoned his sword. When the black net covered his body and was about to close the net, he suddenly made a move. His hands grabbed a bull-sized hole in the black net, and he angrily shouted, "Break for me!" Hiss! The soft but tough black net was instantly torn like a cloth, making a harsh and unpleasant sound. Dudian was like an angry beast freed from its cage. He took a step forward, and the ground slightly trembled. He rushed out like an arrow and crashed into the Purple Feather Army. The Purple Feather Army reacted very quickly. Dozens of shields formed a giant shield in front of Dean as they saw him break through the net. Bang! Chapter 661. Dean rolled out of the mess. As soon as he looked up, he saw a shield smashing towards his head. He fiercely punched it. Bang! A violent collision sound rang out, and the burly armored soldier with the shield spat out a mouthful of blood. His body flew backwards, knocking over 2 knights. One of the knights' horse was hit in the head, and he died on the spot. The shield in the hands of the soldier was deeply caved in. It looked like a fist brand. The Purple Feather Cavalry were dumbfounded. What kind of monster is this? Dean's palm hit the ground, and he rushed forward like a cannonball. How is this possible? The 5-star admiral looked at this scene through the overlook mirror and was stunned. Zidowin stared at the unstoppable Dean. He turned to a young man who was leaning on the sofa. "We have met a tricky enemy. We may need you to take action." The young man was enjoying the snacks and fruits on the table. He smiled as he heard Zidowin's words. "Who is it? Look at how scared you are." Zidowin replied, "The person is very strong. He is far beyond the level of a hunter. He may not even be a primary limitless. Oh, when the young man heard this, he immediately became interested. He took a bite of the fruit that was worth more than gold and threw it out of the carriage. His figure flashed and appeared beside Zidane. He raised his hand in front of his eyebrows, as if to block the sun. He looked forward and soon saw the chaotic area in front of him. He raised his eyebrows slightly and smiled. Interesting. No wonder he dares to attack the formation alone. He probably wants to capture you and end this war. Zidane stared at him. Are you sure? Sure? The young man looked at her in surprise as if he had heard something unbelievable. You're asking me if I'm confident? Dear, are you insulting me? No. The five-star general knew that the young man was from the inner wall. He didn't dare to offend him. Commander, doesn't mean that. Why are you interrupting when the big shots are talking? The young man glanced at him sideways. His gaze was as cold as ice, without the slightest emotion and without the slightest playful attitude towards Hidovan. The five-star general was taken aback, his entire body feeling a chill. He was so embarrassed that he didn't know how to reply, but he felt somewhat humiliated and annoyed. He was old enough to be this young man's father, yet he was actually called a child. However, when he thought of the other party's identity, he could only admit it. Zidane's expression was indifferent as he said, I know you're very strong, but the enemy isn't weak either. It's better for you not to underestimate them. Looks like you've underestimated me. There was a sad expression on the young man's face. I'm from the inner wall. I don't know where this kid came from, but I can tell from his skills that he's just a primary limitless. Well, he's close to the level of a senior limitless. But I've killed a lot of senior limitless. My lord, you're truly formidable. The five-star general immediately complimented. The young man smiled at him. The five-star general immediately felt overwhelmed by the favor, and his face was full of smiles. Zidane looked at the battlefield in front of him and said, Since that's the case, you should make your move as soon as possible so that my men don't die in vain. It's just a bunch of trash. It doesn't matter if a few of them die. The young man didn't care. He didn't intend to continue watching the battle. He twisted his neck and made a cracking sound. After doing a few warm-up exercises, he winked at Zidane with a hint of temptation. Don't forget what we agreed on after this is done. I always keep my word. Zidane calmly replied. Good. Whoosh. The young man's body flew out as soon as he finished his words. It seemed as if a hurricane was set off from where he stood. The chariot shook slightly. The five-star general looked at the young man who seemed to have teleported away, and his eyes were filled with shock. Although he rather detested this young man, he had to admit that other than having a higher status than him, the young man's strength was something he had never seen before. So strong. The five-star general sighed. I didn't expect that a random person from the inner wall would be so strong. He didn't come here randomly. Zidane said indifferently. The five-star general looked at her. He wanted to say something, but hesitated. What do you want to say? Zidane seemed to notice the corner of the five-star general's mouth. The five-star general's heart shuddered slightly. He immediately found a topic and said, What I want to say is, after he gets rid of this person, do we need to capture the entire church? Shouldn't we also capture the Holy Church in one fell swoop, since they have treated us like this? We'll talk about this when all three commanders are present. Zidane replied coldly. Yes, the five-star general said respectfully and took the opportunity to flatter him. Commander, you've saved St. Lorenzo and Commander Bryson. You've saved the entire army. Such a great achievement. You must... What? Zidane suddenly cried out. The five-star general felt strange but could only repeat, Commander, this rescue. He was halfway through his sentence when he heard a creaking sound. He saw that Zidane was holding the edge of the chariot with too much force and had crushed the guardrail. He was shocked and looked up at Zidane's face. He saw a beautiful face that was shocked to the extreme. Her expression was distorted because of the shock. He was stunned for a moment and suddenly reacted. He grabbed the telescope and looked in the direction of Zidane's gaze. He immediately saw the young man in black armor rushing straight towards the chaotic area in front of him. In the air beside him, a head rolled down. It was a young man who had rushed out earlier. The young man's face was no longer playful. Instead, it was full of horror. His eyes were wide open, as if his eyeballs are going to fall out. "What?" he cried out in horror. He found that his reaction was the same as Commander Zidon's. Just one punch. Zidon's eyes widened. She wasn't ignorant about the power system of the inner wall. On the contrary, she was shocked because she knew about it. Although the previous fight was short, but she had been paying attention to it. She saw that Dean had killed the young man and broke his neck. What kind of terrifying strength was needed to break the neck with just a fist and cause the head to be sent flying? In her mind, only the legendary figures of the inner wall could kill the young man. But the scene in front of her was so real that she suspected it was fake. Whoosh! Dean swung his left arm to block the lance that was stabbing at him. He looked at the woman who was wearing Commander's clothes in front of him. He had to release his full strength when he fought against the master who had suddenly jumped out. Otherwise, he would be dragged into the enemy's army and would exhaust his physical strength. Now that he had exposed his true strength, he was too lazy to continue to hold back. Bang! Bang! Several cavalrymen were trampled by Dean's foot. Their shoulders made cracking sounds. Their legs softened and they knelt on the ground. Even the professionally trained horses couldn't bear the recoil force. Dean was like a black shadow as he passed through the army. He arrived in front of the gorgeous chariot in the middle of the army. Dean's speed gradually slowed down. He stepped on the shoulder of a cavalryman and leaped into the air. After flying for a few feet, he kicked the chest of the cavalryman who was protecting the chariot. The cavalryman flew back and rubbed the side of the chariot. He fell into the army behind the chariot. Dean was standing on the back of the horse. He looked down at Zidon with indifferent eyes, as if he was looking at an ant. Chapter 662. The chaotic battlefield seemed to have suddenly quietened down. Zidon stared blankly at the boy on horseback. The flying grass and the slow-moving soldiers seemed to be gradually moving away from her. She felt as if she was suddenly isolated from the world and sealed in a world of ice and snow without any temperature. The most dazzling thing in her sight was the eyes of the boy whose armor was stained with blood. They were like two deep black holes projected from the clouds. This brief illusion was broken by the long neigh of a strong horse. The cries of the surrounding soldiers were deafening once again. Dean jumped off the horse and gently landed on the edge of the chariot. This time he was closer to Zidon. Zidon's cheek was just in front of Dean's knee. It was less than an arm's length away from Dean. The five-star general standing next to Zidon was completely stunned. His body seemed to be strangled by some mysterious force, and he froze on the spot, unable to move. He could only hear the sound of his heart pounding wildly. He desperately wanted to move his feet back, but his feet seemed to be nailed to the ground and did not listen to him. "Do you want to be free from this? Or surrender to me, like Saint Lorenza?" Dean turned a blind eye to the spears and swords around him. He squatted down and quietly looked at the mature beauty. Bang! One of the spears stabbed at his face from the side. He gently raised his hand and grabbed the spear head. His arm jerked, and the senior colonel who was sitting on the horse with the other end of the spear fell off the horse. Then he turned his palm, and the 4-meter-long spear made by the military rotated between his fingers. He swung it like a huge windmill, blocking all the weapons from other directions. Although he exerted strength in his hand, his body didn't shake at all. It showed how skillful his control of strength was. All these years, whenever his left hand was not in use, he would use his left hand to train. Although his left hand was still numb, it was a world of difference compared to when he had just lost his senses. Moreover, due to the training of his numb left hand, he had a different understanding of his strength. His control over the fine details was not inferior to many experienced experts. The wind from the rotation of the spear blew the hair in front of Zidon's forehead. She felt a little difficult to breathe. It was as if the air around her had been plundered. The huge pressure was brought by the teenager who was squatting on the guardrail of the chariot. However, after all, she had been a commander for many years. She quickly calmed down and stared at Dean's deep eyes. She regained her momentum and said word by word, "Even if you kill me, you will die. They will still attack until all the Knights of the Order are killed." Dean waved his arm, and the spear suddenly pierced the throat of a major general who came to the rescue. He turned his palm slightly, and the tip of the spear twisted slightly in the throat of the major general. Then he pulled back, and the blood splashed on the chariot. He looked down at her without the slightest emotion, raised his other hand, and gently lifted her chin. I didn't kill you directly because I don't want to waste my life. Don't think that you are really important. Even without you, Saint Lorenza can still manage these people. Zidane felt that the palm on his chin was extremely cold. How is this a human palm? It was clearly a piece of bone-piercing ice. She slightly leaned back and broke away from Dean's palm. However, the coldness on her chin slowly penetrated into her heart. She knew that she was completely defeated. Dean was right. If she died, Dean could throw out the surrendered St. Lorenzo and still manage these troops. At that time, her death would be an unnecessary sacrifice. Moreover, she also knew that the reason why Dean said these words to her was not because he cared about her sacrifice, but he was too lazy to bother. This was because she could clearly see the impatience in the youth's eyes. Make your choice. Dean quietly stared at her. Zidane's mind was in chaos. She knew that she was no match for the boy from the previous fight. Her struggle was futile as the gap in strength was too big. I admit defeat. Zidane slightly bowed her head as she clenched her fingers. This was the first time she had suffered such a big humiliation. At the moment, she could only pin her hopes on the inner wall. As long as the military of the inner wall took action, there was hope to eliminate Dean. Let them rest in place. Dean immediately issued an order. Zidane took a deep breath and looked at the 5-star general. Pass the order. Rest in place. The 5-star general came back to his senses and wanted to speak, but then he thought that the commander had already surrendered. If he said anything more, wouldn't he be inviting a fatal disaster? He could only lower his head and agree. He shouted at the generals who were rushing over. All of you stop. Pass down the order. The entire army is to rest and reorganize where they are. The generals were stunned. They looked at Zidane and Dean, who was squatting on the guardrail of the chariot. One of the colonels couldn't help but ask, Commander, are you being coerced by him? We are coming to help you. The 5-star general's expression changed slightly, and he shouted angrily, What nonsense are you spouting? Are you trying to defy a military order? The colonel's face changed. He immediately shrank his head and didn't dare to make a sound. The other generals didn't dare to continue to speak. They turned around and left. Dean glanced at the 5-star general. I knew that the ability of the generals in the military was better than the civilians. I didn't think that the ability to surrender was the same as the civilians. It's not surprising that there are corrupt people in a corrupt system. It's a pity that they aren't as brave as a soldier. The general was embarrassed. He changed the topic. Mr. Dean, I've heard a lot about you. I didn't think that you would have such a good ability in addition to producing inventions. If I knew this, then I would have discussed with the Holy Church to let you come to our military. Aren't I here now? Dean waved his hand and signaled him to move to the side. He jumped onto the chariot. Since ancient times, the inheritance of power is bound to breed corruption. I know that aristocratic titles can be hereditary and positions in the Holy Church can be inherited. But it's the first time I know that the generals of the military can also inherit power. Fortunately, the Fillan family has a talented general. The other families may not have such a strict family style. Zidane's face was gloomy. After all, the system had been passed down for more than 200 years. She didn't have the ability to change it even if she knew about it. She went straight to the topic. Do you work for the Holy Church? It's the opposite. Chapter 663. Call the generals over there to come with me to the headquarters. Don't let everyone wait for too long. Dean said to Zidane. She looked at the boy and suppressed the shock in her heart. She was silent for a little and let the 5-star general pass Dean's words. She knew that Dean wanted to take away the command of the army and cut off the joints of the army. Soon, the 6 generals galloped over with their personal guards to meet Cedron. You stay here to look after the army. Dean said to the five-star general. The five-star general was startled. Why me? Because you are afraid of death. I know you won't mess around. Dean said in a direct manner. The five-star general was embarrassed, but he was able to get to the position he had today. This kind of insult was nothing to him. He bowed his head and suppressed the anger in his heart. Dean was relieved to see the five-star general's appearance. He jumped from a chariot and sat on the back of a horse in front of him. He pulled the horse's rope and used his strength to suppress the struggling horse. He looked back at Zidowin. The corner of Zidowin's mouth twitched, but she didn't say anything. She called a horse and led the 6 generals to follow Dean and left the army. On the high slope, Richelieu, St. Lorenzo, and the others watched as the army in front of them gradually calmed down. Because of the large number of people in the army, Dean was deep in the crowd. Even Richelieu's vision couldn't see where Dean's figure was. They were anxiously waiting for Dean's figure. Suddenly, they saw the army open up a path. Several cavalrymen rushed out of it. They were led by a black armored figure. Richelieu's eyes widened in shock. Although he knew that the army might not be able to kill Dean, it was still incredible to see him return safely. Soon, he saw the cavalry following behind Dean. All of them were wearing armors and epaulets. One of them had a beautiful figure. Her long hair was fluttering under the helmet. She had a different kind of charm. She was one of the 3 commanders of the military region, Zidane. He really did it. Richelieu felt a trace of palpitation in his heart. St. Lorenzo, Bryson, and the other generals were stunned when they saw the faces of the cavalries. They didn't expect Dean to face thousands of troops alone and return safely. Moreover, he was followed by Commander Zidowin. Is Zidowin crazy? She actually left the army. Bryson couldn't help but shout in anger. Next to him, St. Lorenzo was relatively calm. The shock in his eyes slowly disappeared, and he said in a low voice, "She must have been forced to come out." Bryson turned to look at him and was stunned when he saw the gloomy expression on Bryson's face. He suddenly realized that the situation was hopeless and the military was going to change hands from now on. He saw Aisha, who was standing motionless next to Sergei. She was standing in the same position as when he left. His heart was relieved. There was a trace of softness in his eyes, but it disappeared in an instant. He stopped in front of Richelieu and the others and dismounted. Zidowin and the other 6 generals arrived one after another. "Are you here to celebrate my triumphant return?" Dean looked at St. Lorenzo and the others. St. Lorenzo, Bryson, and the other generals felt humiliated. They didn't have a mirror, but they could feel how ugly their faces were at the moment. They lowered their heads in shame and indignation. They used silence to resist the last bit of dignity. "Take them in," Dean said to Richelieu. "Yes, master," Richelieu replied. Ernie and the other knights who were standing behind Richelieu looked at Dean in shock. They felt that everything they had seen today was like a dream. It had completely subverted their imagination. Commander Bryson, Commander St. Lorenzo. When the 6 generals behind Zidane saw St. Lorenzo and the others being subdued, they were shocked and angry. One of them pulled out his saber and glared at Richelieu and the others. Zidowin knew that the situation was settled. He didn't want them to make unnecessary sacrifices. "Stop. We have lost." Lost. The 6 generals were stunned as they looked at her. One of the generals was impatient. "Commander, we have so many brothers behind us. We have tens of thousands of troops in our hands. Why should we surrender? Are we afraid of the Holy Church?" Zidowin calmed down. "We are not afraid of the Holy Church, but Mr. Dean can kill us one by one in the army. You have seen the previous chaos. He rushed into the army and scathed and killed several generals. No one could stop him. I am far from being his opponent. He isn't someone who can be defeated by numbers. We have lost." The 6 generals were stunned. The biggest feature of the army is obedience to orders. The subordinates obey the superiors. It's like ants obeying the queen. Dean, who was standing next to Sergei, slowly said, "It's difficult to kill soldier ants one by one. But if you trample the queen, then the soldier ants will be scattered like sand. The biggest advantage is also the biggest disadvantage. Moreover, it's a disadvantage that can't be covered. Do you know?" "Yes, master." Sergei nodded, but his heart was boiling. He didn't expect that Dean would be able to capture the enemy's leader. He had only heard of such things in the bard's stories. Dean looked at him and knew that he didn't listen to him. He didn't say anything more. He walked to the side and held Aisha's hand. The indifference on his face melted like ice and snow. He said softly, "Sorry to keep you waiting. Let's go." Aisha was silent. Dean took her hand and walked towards the military headquarters. Richelieu immediately retreated to the side. Elnarin and the rest of the knights who were standing behind him also retreated. At the same time, there was a remote grassland tens of thousands of meters away. There was a person's head under the grass. He was holding binoculars and looking at the distant high slope. Chapter 664. Dean was sitting in the highest position in the conference room of the military headquarters. His body was covered in black armor. The smell of blood made people feel heavy. Aisha and Sergei were standing next to him. Richelieu, Poulot, and the rest of the knights from the Holy Church were standing under the stairs. They were escorting the generals of the military, Bryson, and the 3 commanders of St. Lorenzo and Zidowin. Poulot and the other knight captains had already figured something out. Although they found it hard to believe, they still silently digested this terrifying conjecture. After all, Richelieu, who they respected so much, had already shown a very clear attitude. At this time, they did not dare to say anything. St. Lorenzo had a complex mood as he looked at the aloof youth. He didn't expect that he would fall into such a situation one day. He didn't expect that the genius who specialized in the invention would have such terrifying strength. He had changed the situation of the outer wall for more than 200 years. The only person who could defeat him was the big shots of the inner wall. Richelieu. Dean called Richelieu's name. "I'll leave the military to you. I hope to see a complete military headquarters before the end of the day." Richelieu was startled. He didn't expect that Dean would throw the military headquarters into his hands. Was it out of trust? Or was it because he was fearless? Or was it to test his loyalty? He couldn't make up his mind. He could only follow Dean's words. "I won't disappoint your expectations." Hearing his respectful words, the captains of the knights in the hall and the generals of the military felt an inexplicable throb. Not so long ago, when did they ever imagine that the high and mighty His Highness the Pope would have such a moment of humility? Several knights were secretly unhappy, but they remembered that Dean had broken into tens of thousands of troops to capture Zidowin. They didn't dare to express their dissatisfaction in their hearts. "Commander Zidowin, the person I killed shouldn't be from the outer wall, right?" Dean asked Zidowin. Zidowin calmly replied, "Yes." Dean nodded slightly. The strength that he used should be at the level of a high-level limitless. Unfortunately, he underestimated the enemy. He didn't reveal his magic marks before attacking me. How could he help you? Is this the trump card of your military? As soon as the words came out, Richelieu, Poulot, as well as the rest of the commanders were shocked. They didn't expect that there was such a fierce master hidden in the previous army. What was more terrifying was that such a person was killed by Dean. Moreover, he was killed with the help of tens of thousands of soldiers. She didn't intend to hide it. St. Lorenzo and Bryson also knew about it. He is from the Monster Research Institute of the Inner Wall. He has some deals with us. That's why he is willing to help. Deal. Dudeen narrowed his eyes. What deal? Richelieu and others looked at her in surprise. They didn't expect that the military would collude with the Monster Research Institute of the Inner Wall. Fortunately, they didn't have a fierce conflict with the military before. Zidowin replied, "The Monster Research Institute of the Inner Wall has been committed to monster research. The monster illustrations of the hunters that the consortiums have cultivated are published by the Monster Research Institute. Even the Holy Church's blessing is from the Monster Research Institute. They need some special materials for some experiments, so they invited us to provide them to them. What about the rewards they gave you?" Dean looked at her. Zidowin's face slightly changed. She wanted to skip this matter, but didn't expect to be singled out by Dean. She looked at St. Lorenzo and Bryson. Both of them were ashen and had no fighting spirit. She sighed at her heart as she knew that there was no need to hide it. "In return, they will provide us with some force and God's marrow. Your superior in the inner wall is the military of the inner wall. Do you need them to provide protection? Dudian said in a cold tone. Zidowin hesitated. Force protection is secondary. The main thing is God's marrow. No wonder your physique has surpassed the level of a hunter, Dean indifferently said. Hearing this, Richelieu and Poulot could not help but look at the female commander in surprise. Zidowin smiled. I have made a breakthrough in recent days. What are the special materials you are providing? Monster materials? If this is the case, then they should cooperate with the Holy Church. The hunters have handed over a lot of monster materials to the Holy Church. Dean asked with interest. Zidowin's face turned ugly. There is nothing special about them. They are just some rare monster corpses. St. Lorenzo interrupted. Dean glanced at him. What are you trying to cover up? St. Lorenzo's face slightly changed as he sighed in his heart. He knew that he couldn't hide it from Dean. He looked at Zidowin and signaled her not to say anything. Zidowin understood what he meant and lowered his head in silence. A captive should act like a captive. Don't tell me you want to suffer a bit. Dean's face was cold. Zidowin slowly loosened her fingers. She looked at Dean and was about to open her mouth. St. Lorenzo hurriedly said, You can't say it, or our military will be destroyed. Zidowin looked at him and then at Dean. She was silent for a long time before whispering, There is nothing that can't be said. These special materials are human bodies. Richelieu's eyes lit up. He wasn't too surprised. Human body experiments were common in the Dark Church. Pierrot and the other commanders were stunned. They didn't expect that the dignified military would secretly trade human bodies to the Monster Research Institute in the inner wall. It had always been illegal to use human bodies for research. They despised it. What was the difference between them and the dark believers who were wanted by them? But such a heartless thing was done by the military who had been guarding the outer wall. Dean frowned. Boring. He thought that it was some mysterious thing that he didn't know about. He didn't think that it was a dark transaction against humanity. No wonder the Monster Research Institute would look for the military and not the Holy Church. The military was indeed more suitable than the Holy Church for transporting human bodies. Is it a living human body? Dean asked. Zidowin bowed her head in silence. Dean's heart suddenly moved. He looked at Aisha, who was next to him, and his eyes flashed a trace of light. The Monster Institute was likely to have a solution to the undead infection if the human body was used for experiments. He felt more and more anxious as he thought of this. He stood up and looked at Richelieu. I'll leave this place to you. I'll go back first. Deal with it as soon as possible and behead anyone who disobeys. Yes, Richelieu respectfully replied. Chapter 665. The monastery in the inner wall was made of white jade bricks. It was full of pure and holy atmosphere. There were 7 or 8 figures sitting in one of the steeple halls. There were dozens of nurses standing next to them. Although the nurses here had the same name as those in the hospital, but they were 2 completely different concepts. They were equivalent to knights. Moglin, is there something urgent that you called us for? A burly old man wearing a black and gold robe asked. Moglin, who was sitting next to the dean, stood up. Dean, there's been a small change in the outer wall that I am in charge of. I need to report it to you. Since it is just a small change, then why do you need to report it? A short and thin old man said in a mocking tone. Moglin glanced at him. There was a trace of killing intent in his heart, but he still had a smile on his face. Although it is a small change, but there has been a person in the outer wall recently. It is worth paying attention to. Moglin, just say it. The abbot simply said. He likes to keep us guessing. The short and thin old man laughed. Moglin looked at him and turned to look at Dean. It's a long story. Half a year ago, there was a period of rapid changes in the outer wall. A talented youth appeared out of nowhere. He invented a number of inventions. Moreover, he created a 10th invention system out of the original 9 basic systems. It was called Chi System. This invention is similar to the legendary forbidden technique that Your Majesty mentioned. Therefore, I used the Holy Church in the outer wall to block the invention of this boy. I took him here and erased his original identity. I appointed him as an elder of the Dark Church in the Outer Wall. I wanted to wait for him to enrich his experience in all aspects before promoting him to be the new pope of the Outer Wall. I didn't expect that he would suddenly disappear. Gas system. Everyone's attention immediately fell on the divine incantation. One of them said, just from the name, it is indeed a bit similar to that forbidden incantation. One is called air, and the other is steam. Both seem to be related to air. The Outer Wall is a desolate place. How can it give birth to such a genius? If the divine incantation system that this person invented is really that forbidden technique, then this person is really a peerless genius. It's a pity that he isn't a member of our pure wall. His status is too low and not worth cultivating. The dean stared at Mo Granong and said, "Continue." Mo Glan smiled and continued. I asked people in the Outer Wall to look for him after his disappearance, but there was no news. Not long ago, this person suddenly appeared. He took control of the Dark Church and used it to control the pontiff of the Outer Wall. Today, he sent troops to attack the military and defeated them. He completely controlled the two biggest chess pieces of the Outer Wall. What? The surrounding people were surprised. Although they didn't put the Outer Wall in their eyes, but they knew more or less about it under Mo Grenang's control for so many years. A person who appeared in the Outer Wall didn't have any resources or background. But in such a short period of time, Mo Granong had taken control of the Outer Wall and unified it. This was simply a fantasy, but they knew that Mo Granong wasn't lying. This only showed that there was too much information worth digging. The dean's eyes narrowed as he looked at Mo Granong. As far as I know, the supervisors who were stationed in the Outer Wall are limitless. How did this youth deal with them? Mo Glang smiled and said, "That's what I want to talk about. In fact, besides the 5 proctors, one of my good friends was also killed by this young man. Her strength can be considered to be at the level of a pioneer. Although she's still a bit weaker than a real pioneer, it's not that far off. Not long ago, I sent her to the Outer Wall with 5 limitless to investigate the cause. But they didn't send back any news until today when I sent someone to investigate in secret. The youth is still alive. Obviously, it means that my good friend is dead along with the 5 limitless. All the pioneers are dead? The surrounding people were dumbfounded and shocked. Even in the Inner Wall, it wasn't easy to see pioneers. They were rare powerhouses. The dean narrowed his eyes as he stared at him. "Continue." Moglin smiled and said, "I thought that the boy used a hidden weapon or some kind of poison to kill them, but it was not the case. My spy saw a person when he was investigating. This person was the previous saintess, Aisha, who had died according to the news of the Dragon Clan some time ago." Everyone was shocked again. The previous saintess of the Dragon Clan appeared in the Outer Wall. If that was the case, then everything in front of them could be explained. But what did this mean? Did the Dragon Clan want to get their hands on the Outer Wall? Did they deliberately announce the news of the previous saintess' death to confuse them? When they thought of all the possibilities, everyone frowned. They felt a trace of worry, as if dark clouds were about to gather. The dean bowed his head in silence. After a moment, he slowly said, "Tell me what you think." Mo Granong looked at him. He was secretly afraid of the dean. He said, "Since we have found the root cause and know our goal, then there's only one problem. How to take back the Outer Wall from the hands of the Dragon Clan. I have 3 opinions on this point." The dean, "Speak." "First, although I saw the traces of the previous saintess in the Outer Wall, but I didn't see it with my own eyes. The spy didn't dare to get close to observe, so he wasn't sure. So, I temporarily set it up. If this news is true, then there's a problem. As far as I know, although the previous saintess of the Dragon Clan and the current saintess are blood-related sisters, they do not have a harmonious relationship. Do you remember what the Dragon Clan announced when the saintess was replaced? They said that the previous saintess was temporarily removed from her position because of a crime. There is a rumor that the previous saintess was framed by Saintess Haley and lost her position. I think the credibility of this rumor is quite high." Moglin smiled. "After all, the Dragon Clan's power has been flourishing since Aisha became the saintess. Wing Clan and Rock Clan have been completely suppressed by the Dragon Clan. They haven't been able to compete with the Dragon Clan in the Wasteland. Saintess Aisha's contribution to the Dragon Clan is obvious to all. There is only one possibility for the Dragon Clan to remove her due to a crime. She has committed an unforgivable crime. But think about it. What kind of person is Saintess Aisha? The Wing Clan and the Rock Clan have been painstakingly trying to kill her for so many years, but they haven't been able to hurt her. How could she be stupid enough to commit an unforgivable crime? So the possibility that she has been framed is very high. This is the key point. If she has been framed, then the hatred between her and Saintess Haley is a sharp blade that we can use. Everyone looked at each other and nodded slightly. They felt that the analysis was reasonable. The short old man, sitting at the opposite table, snorted. Although he was somewhat dissatisfied, but he knew that what the dean said was right. If the Dragon Clan really wants to attack the outer wall, then there is no need to send a Saintess to preside over the overall situation. Dean was silent for a moment. There is a higher possibility that the Saintess will seize the outer wall because of the removal of her position. She will hold a grudge against the dragons because of that. So she wants to take over the outer wall and compete with the dragons. Chapter 666. Go on with your second point. Dean didn't agree or deny. It seemed that he wanted to listen to other ideas. Moglin knew what he was worried about, but he didn't expose it. The second point is to use the military. I just said that this person has ruled the military of the outer wall. Such a move will inevitably anger the military. For so many years, we've been giving some face to the military of the outer wall. We don't want to offend the military when the time is not ripe. But he did it. An old man nodded. This is a good idea. The military will not sit back and do nothing. We can send them to take the lead and hide the information about this boy. Let them collide with us and see if they can find out anything we don't know yet. Although this person may be a genius, but he is too young and his mind is not clear. He wants to unify the outer wall. It's really pitiful and ridiculous. Another old man wearing a black and white striped hat sneered. Although the outer wall is an abandoned land, but after all it is the territory of His Majesty. This person is really stupid to want to rule the outer wall. What's your third point? Moglin glanced at them and saw that they were leaning towards him. He smiled. The third point is to wait and see. Although I'm not sure whether the woman beside this boy is the real Saintess Aisha, I'm sure that he has the power to kill pioneers. If we kill him personally, we need at least 2 pioneers to kill him. The safest way is 3 pioneers, so that he has no chance to escape. It's foolproof. However, in this way, we have to mobilize the pioneers in each branch, which will affect too many people, and the loss outweighs the gain. Fortunately, this boy is like a snake trying to swallow an elephant. So we don't need to do it ourselves to recapture the outer wall. Isn't it the most satisfying thing to borrow someone else's knife to kill our enemy? Dean touched his beard. You are the most familiar with the situation of the outer wall. I will leave this matter to you. First inform the military and the dragon family, and see their reaction. Yes, Dean. Moglin respectfully replied. Master, you are back. Barton rushed out of the hall to greet Dudian. Dean nodded slightly. He was relieved to see him safe and sound. He glanced at the wall builders who were digging the trenches. Is it going well? It's going well. Barton laughed. They're all excellent wall builders. They're very good at repairing giant walls. Remodeling the shrine is just a piece of cake. Dudian nodded. Did Riley come back? I haven't seen Mr. Riley yet. Barton shook his head, a hint of worry in his eyes. Did something happen? I won't. Dean patted Sergei's shoulder and led Aisha to the side hall. He called Sergei, called Gwyneth and Glenn. Also tell Noyce to come here. Yes, young master. Sergei nodded, then turned and left. Dean asked Barton to get Aisha's lunch after Sergei left. He started to work on his own matters after feeding her. The temple was being remodeled. He intended to build it into his future stronghold. The wall builders dug trenches to facilitate the burying of cables. The reason why he chose this place as the stronghold was very simple. Wuta'al Mountain was the highest mountain in the outer wall. It was easy to defend and difficult to attack. Moreover, there was a cliff behind the temple. It was convenient to discharge pollution from power generation. He knew that the real battle would come after he poked the hornet's nest of the military. But he wasn't worried. He knew that the inner wall wouldn't put him in their eyes for a while. He had enough time to perfect his layout. The invention could only give him protection. But if he blindly defended, then sooner or later he would be penetrated. He had to counterattack and attack at the same time. You said that you can't fully stimulate the magic mark's ability without a magic hunter. Only the Monster Research Institute can develop a magic hunter. Dean looked at Aisha next to him. His eyes were misty, as if he was looking at an unreachable distance. I can only be regarded as half a primary limitless. The transformation effect of the legendary deified magic mark is too strong. If I continue to evolve, my body will mutate, and it will be permanent and irreversible. I can only develop a magic tool before that happens. I don't know what level of person in the Monster Research Institute is able to develop a magic tool. It's time to explore it. His eyebrows slightly wrinkled as he pondered. It didn't take long for Sergei, Noyce, Glenn, and the others to arrive. "Master, they're coming," Sergei said while panting. "Thanks for your hard work." Dean looked at Gwyneth and Glenn. "Do you remember the last time I took you to the inner wall? I need you to go to the inner wall." "I remember." Gwyneth's eyes lit up. "Master, what is it?" "Go and investigate the level of person in the Monster Research Institute who can develop a magic tool." Dean stared at Glenn. "Your Blackweaver magic marks are good at lurking. I'll leave this matter to you." Glenn suddenly felt a trace of pressure and asked, "Am I going alone?" "Gwyneth has other tasks." Dean said, "You don't have to worry about the situation of the inner wall. Gwyneth will give you a detailed introduction. You can find a map of the inner wall. As far as I know, there should be many branches of the Monster Research Institute. You only need to sneak into the remote Monster Research Institute. Although your strength is far behind the inner wall, but you are at the peak of Senior Hunter. I'll help you evolve your physique to the primary, limitless level. That would be a good level for a guard in the inner wall." Gwyneth and Glenn were relieved after hearing his words. Glenn nodded. "I'll try my best to complete the task. The time limit is 24 hours. The sooner the better." Dean solemnly said, "We will encounter very strong enemies. The longer we delay, the more dangerous it will be for us." "I know," Glenn said solemnly. Dean nodded and looked at Gwyneth. "Your task is to go to the inner wall and investigate the underground structure of the cities. I need a map of the sewers in the inner wall." Gwyneth was surprised, as she didn't know why Dean wanted this information. But it was a good thing for her to return to the inner wall. "I know, Master. I'll give you 24 hours. Once the time is up, you must come back, no matter how much you have completed." Dean looked at her. Gwyneth lowered her head. "I promise to complete the task. Go." Dean waved his hand. "The military will transport a batch of God's marrows. I left a portion for both of you. You can go to Barton to get it." Gwyneth and Gwyneth's eyes lit up. "Thank you, Master." After the two left, Noyce asked, "Young Master, what about me?" "You will stay by my side." Dean said, "Your magic marks could digest poison. I'm worried that someone will try to assassinate me. You will help me test the poison in my meals in the future." Noyce came to his senses. Dean had almost been poisoned when he lived in the castle, so it wasn't strange for him to stay by Dean's side. Moreover, he felt a different warmth from Dean. It was obvious that Dean had great trust in him. Sergei looked at Noyce and sighed in his heart. After all, they had come out of the prison together. Revolutionary feelings were different. "Sergei, are my two classmates still in the castle?" Dudian asked. Sergei knew that Dean was referring to Mason and Zach. "They are in the castle. Contact Hawkeye of the 9th Region and ask him to take them to exercise. In addition, give them rare magic marks. Be sure to let them grow as fast as possible." Dudian said. He had a lot of feelings for Mason and Zach. They supported each other when they were scavengers. He had saved them many times, and they had also saved him. Their kindness was far deeper than other people's. Although Sham's matter made him disappointed, but it didn't affect his opinion of Mason and Zach. He believed that these two were his companions that he had supported for many years. As long as they were given resources and opportunities, they would certainly be able to achieve something. Sometimes, many people just lacked an opportunity. Successful people were able to find opportunities and create opportunities. The other part of the people were excellent, but lacked the vision to find opportunities. If they were given an opportunity, then they might be able to make a big achievement. Mason and Zach belonged to this category. With Dean's current status and resources, it would be a piece of cake for him to cultivate several senior hunters. It wouldn't be difficult for him to cultivate a limitless expert, but he couldn't inject too much blessing at a time. Even if he injected it at the highest frequency, it would take a week or two. However, Dean wanted to train both of them. In addition to strength, he wanted to train both of them with wisdom. He knew that all the things he had seen along the way had subverted his original perception. He didn't want the two of them to suddenly see him do something that was beyond their understanding. Let them go to the dark church. Sergei looked at Dudian and quickly understood his thoughts. There was an inexplicable, strange feeling in his heart. It was like an inexplicable sadness. He felt that the boy who was standing at the top was a bit sad, but he didn't dare to show his thoughts. Although Dudian's attitude towards him was no different from others, but he knew that he couldn't be compared with Dudian's two childhood friends. And bring Artemis and Gabriel. Dudian almost missed the two little guys. His eyes lit up when he thought of Artemis's green hair, which was completely different from the others. I know. Sergei bowed his head. You and Noyce will get a portion of the god's marrow after the military has moved over. You have to become limitless as soon as possible so that you can deal with the incoming enemies. Dean said. Sergei was startled. He bowed his head. Thank you, Master. Noyce also said, Thank you, Master. Go. Shortly after Sergei left, Barton rushed to the side hall and excitedly said, Master, Joseph is back. Dean's eyes lit up. Bring him. Barton hurriedly turned and ran. After a while, he came back with several people. The leader was Riley. Riley knelt down as he saw Dudian. Greetings, Master. I brought the person you asked me to pick up. Get up, Dean said as he looked at the person behind him. It was Joseph who he had placed in the military. It had been a long time since they last met, and the current Joseph was completely different from what he remembered. His skin was tanned, and his body was bronze in color. His body was well-defined and full of strength. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot in the army. He stood up and greeted, You're finally here. Joseph was startled as he looked at Dean. He couldn't believe that this was the headquarters of the Holy Church. His impression of Barton was that he was always dressed sloppily, but at the moment he was wearing a gorgeous pontiff robe. Dean's complexion was pale, but the change wasn't obvious. He looked a bit weak and haggard. However, no matter how he looked at it, he couldn't see any familiar shadow. It was as if it was a completely different person, making him feel somewhat unfamiliar. However, with Dean's words, there was a kind of warmth in his heart. The previous strangeness dissipated in an instant. He excitedly hugged Dean and said, I thought I would never see you again. How could it be? Dean patted his shoulder. How are you? I didn't expect you to be so muscular after staying in the army for a while. Barton jokingly punched Joseph's chest. Joseph suddenly felt a strong sense of closeness. His eyes became slightly moist, and he gave Barton a big hug. Dean talked with Joseph for a long time. He thought of Riley. Riley, you go back. Barton, you should think about giving him a reward. Barton patted his head. That's right, but what should I give him? He blushed as he thought about it. Although he was the pontiff, he didn't know about the treasures of the Holy Church. He was clear about the position, but he knew that Dean's attitude towards Riley couldn't be included in the Holy Church. After all, Dean had suddenly disappeared in the Holy Church. If he returned to the Holy Church, then it would inevitably cause unwarranted speculation. Take your time. I don't think Riley is in a hurry, right? Dean said. Riley respectfully replied, Yes, Master. Dean talked with Joseph for a moment after Riley left. Barton took him to rest while he continued to busy himself with his own matters. Another day passed in the blink of an eye. Under the pressure of both the Vatican and the military, the next day's morning papers and special reports did not publicize the war between the Vatican and the military. Instead, they said that the two sides had reached an agreement amicably, obscuring the fact that Bryson was a follower of the Dark Church. This was also the method that the military and the Vatican had used to cover up the truth. It could be said that practice made perfect. Richelieu returned to the Holy Church at noon the next day. He reported to Dean, "Master, the military has been adjusted. All the generals have been replaced by our people. The 3 commanders have been replaced. I have appointed Bishop Elnarin to temporarily supervise the military, but he won't show up. Well, I'll leave the military to you. I'll look for you if there's a problem." On the dining table, Dean used a knife to insert a piece of medium-rare beef dripping with blood and gave it to Aisha to eat. He tried to slowly change her eating taste. First, she changed from human meat to beef. Now, he gradually heated the beef for her to eat. He hoped that one day, she would be able to happily eat medium-rare beef. In that case, his heart would feel a little better. At least he didn't have to look at her every time she ate. He believed that she wouldn't like her current appearance. Richelieu looked at him and lowered his head. "Master, we have taken down the military. The magistrate and the Knights' Hall are nothing to be afraid of. Should we take advantage of the situation and take them down?" "No hurry," Dean said. "We have attracted the attention of the inner wall. Now we have to find a way to deal with the anger of the military and the monastery. As for the magistrate and the Knights' Hall, we don't need to worry about them as long as they don't cause us trouble. If they dare to make trouble, then we will destroy them." Richelieu knew that the biggest problem was the inner wall. He asked, "Master, do you have a way to deal with them?" Chapter 667. Making Forbidden Techniques? Richelieu's face changed. The reason why forbidden techniques were classified as forbidden techniques was because they were too destructive and could easily destroy the giant wall. Or they were too cruel and could destroy human nature. However, Dean was going to use such forbidden techniques. It could be said that he was going to do anything in pursuit of victory. "Master, some of these forbidden techniques need to be fully activated. Some of them require a large number of human subjects to be used for experiments. I'm afraid that the dark cultists will arrest people and make a big mess," Richelieu carefully said. He knew that the only way to stop Dean wasn't to destroy too much, but to sacrifice too many lives. "It doesn't matter. This is the time for the Holy Church to establish its prestige," Dean indifferently said. "The frequent activities of the dark cultists will make people feel the fear of being attacked by the dark cultists. They will become more dependent on the Holy Church. Even those who secretly complain about us won't dare to say anything. After all, we only need to suppress the dark cultists, and we can make up for all other mistakes. You have to know that people are selfish and forgetful. No matter what you have done in the past, as long as you can protect them in times of crisis, they will be grateful to you." Dean looked down at him. "You used to do this kind of thing? I don't think I need to explain it in detail." Richelieu's face changed. He admitted that Dean was right from the point of view of interests, but he had to deny one point. Although he had done the same thing in the past, but the degree of grasp was very heavy. He had blocked the forbidden techniques and wouldn't touch them easily. Although this was the intention of the monastery, but he had the same idea in his heart. After all, it was easy to get out of control in chaos. "I know." He lowered his head. He knew that Dean had made up his mind. It was useless to say more. He didn't continue to persuade Dean. After all, it was dangerous for him to persuade Dean. Moreover, the civilians wouldn't know that he had done this kind of thing. He didn't want to be a hero. He didn't have that kind of tragic and heroic feeling. The way of thinking about interests had long penetrated into his bone marrow. If what I read in the history books is true, then the sighing wall was built by the inner wall. Dean's eyes looked out of the window into the distance. He could see the sighing wall from the top of the mountain. Of course, it was difficult for ordinary people to see it, but it wasn't difficult for him and Richelieu to see it clearly. Richelieu was surprised as he didn't know what Dadian meant. He bowed his head. Yes, there was no distinction between the inner and outer walls of the giant wall. But because of a sudden disaster, most of the survivors migrated to the inner wall area. That is the core area of the giant wall. Then they built the side wall in this isolated area. Everyone who was born in the outer wall wants to cross the wall. Do you also want to? Dadian said. Richelieu looked at him, thought for a moment, and said honestly, I have thought about it. Thought about it? Why didn't you think about it later? Is it because you have enjoyed the taste of comfort after becoming the pontiff? You are too lazy to fight? There was a trace of embarrassment on Richelieu's face. Although Dean's words were very straightforward, but it did hit the nail on the head. The older he was, the more he didn't want to move. He didn't want to struggle. After all, he was already standing at the top of the world. If he continued to struggle, then it was very likely that he would have nothing. We have to count on the wall for the war. Dean indifferently said, this time the inner wall will be eager to break the wall. They might even hate the wall, just like how you hated the wall in the past. Richelieu was startled. He was puzzled, but didn't ask much. He felt that the youth was planning something. Go to your work. Duddian waved. Inner wall. Dragon Clan's territory. The Dragon Clan was one of the 3 major families. Their territory was extremely vast. The clan's territory was comparable to a large city. As for the garrisons that were built near the cities, it was even more huge. At this moment, on the Holy Maiden Peak of the Dragon Clan, Hathaway was practicing with her spear in the public square. A giant spear danced in her slender hands like a ferocious dragon, its momentum swift and fierce. The surrounding servants didn't dare to make the slightest sound. The Saint's Peak was completely different from the time when Aisha was in charge. The mountain was no longer desolate and desolate. The best craftsmen had been invited to transform the buildings into the style that she liked. The floors were renovated and the mountain roads were full of servants. It was like a fortress with iron walls. Even if a bird were to invade, it would be shot down. On the steps at the end of the square, a middle-aged man with an extremely pale face and a figure as light as a feather quietly floated over like a ghost. He walked without any wind, but he was incomparably agile. He quietly came to the side of the field where Hathaway was practicing her spear and stood there, watching her practice. Hathaway had noticed him a long time ago. When he came over, she flicked her wrist and finished practicing the last dragon stab. She immediately put away her spear and turned her head to ask, Sir, what's the matter? She knew that if it wasn't something important, he wouldn't come looking for her personally. Miss, I just got the news from the monastery. I heard that the spies of the monastery saw your sister in the outer wall. The middle-aged man went straight to the point. Haley's eyes widened. She stabbed the spear into the ground. Impossible. She's dead. It's impossible for her to be alive. I know, but the news from the monastery shouldn't be false. There must be something fishy about it. The middle-aged man said. It's impossible. Haley clenched the spear. No matter what, it's impossible for her to be alive. Back then, what we encountered was a great corpse king that had evolved its consciousness, and she was seriously injured. I saw it with my own eyes. She couldn't have survived. Her demon hunting tool was left in the wilderness for so long, and it wasn't recovered. How could she still be alive? The middle-aged man's eyes flashed. He didn't expect that after such a long time, it would make her so excited. It was difficult for her to control her emotions. He sighed in his heart. It seemed that the shadow of that person was too big for her since childhood. As far as I know, the monastery has been secretly operating the isolated outer wall. I don't know why they're doing this, but I have sent people to the outer wall. The outer wall isn't as desolate and barren as we had imagined. However, I don't see any value in it. The middle-aged man said, the area there is too small. The people who are left there are inferior people. The people who have been expelled to the outer wall are servants of nobles and criminals. They are inferior people with inferior bloodlines. The descendants of them are the same. However, I have seen a ridiculous phenomenon in the outer wall. The aristocratic servants who have been expelled from the outer wall actually call themselves nobles. They also imitate the Psi wall to build an isolation wall to separate the inferior people. It's really ignorant. Haley's heart was upset. She frowned. Do you still care about this? The middle-aged man saw that she was disgusted and smiled. There's been turmoil in the outer wall recently. The monastery's forces in the outer wall have been pulled out. It is said that pioneers have been sent to solve the problem. The result was that the pioneers were killed. Some people have seen people like your sister appear in the outer wall. So I think we need to investigate. Her name is Aisha, Not my sister, Haley said word by word. The pale-faced, middle-aged man was slightly startled. He immediately smiled and said, "All right, I was wrong." Only then did Hathaway look away from his face. She said coldly, "I understand what you want to say. I will let Eleanor investigate this matter." Chapter 668. Glenn reported to Dudian, "Master, I sneaked into a branch of the Monster Research Institute in the inner wall and asked the staff. They said that there are many levels of difficulty in casting the magic tool. It mainly depends on the materials and grade of the magic tool. If you want to make a top legendary magic tool, then you need to have a doctor." Doctor? Dean, who was thinking, heard the term. He was puzzled. Was it a coincidence, or was it a name inherited from the old era? If it was the latter, then it meant that the inner wall had clues about the old era. But he didn't know how much they had. He had been to the inner wall, but didn't see any electric tools. It showed that even the inner wall didn't have the ability to generate electricity. Is it really just a coincidence? Dudian frowned. From the environment of the inner wall, it didn't seem like they had mastered the knowledge of the old era. Otherwise, the language system wouldn't have changed completely. One had to know that creating a new language system was extremely difficult, and it was difficult to complete it in a short 300 years. Moreover, compared to the language system of the olden era, he discovered that the language system they were using now was completely comparable to the Chinese characters of the olden era. Chinese characters were the only high-level language in the world in the old era. It had been precipitated for thousands of years, but the language system they were using now was not inferior to Chinese characters. "Master?" Glenn saw that Dudian didn't speak for a long time. She was perturbed as she called out to him. Dean reacted, and his thoughts were interrupted. He frowned slightly and said, "Go on. I have investigated. Doctor is a very high-level title in the Monster Research Institute. There is a rank above doctor. Generally, a doctor will serve as the director of the branch." Glenn said, "The Grand Doctor rarely shows up. He usually only studies legendary monster-level projects. As for the rare monster-level projects, the Grand Doctor is in charge of them." "Doctor?" Dudian was inexplicably relieved. "You have worked hard to find so much information in just one day. What happened to your shoulder? Is it hurt?" Glenn looked at her right hand. She didn't expect Dudian's eyes to be so sharp. She smiled. "It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Master doesn't have to worry about it." "Noise, go and ask the priest to come and treat Glenn." Dudian ordered Noise. "Yes, Master." Noise nodded and silently retreated. Glenn felt a trace of warmth in her heart. She didn't continue to refuse. "Young Master, in addition to this information, I also saw some strange things when I sneaked into the Monster Research Institute. I don't know how to describe them. Well, let me think. There were some big green jars. They looked like jars filled with green liquid. There were some strange creatures soaked in them. Some are monsters, but some are monsters with human heads and demon bodies. It looked like a human head was grafted onto a monster's body." At this point, she once again recalled the faces of the creatures that seemed to be sleeping in the green jars, and instinctively felt a chill down her spine. Monsters with human heads? There was a trace of coldness in Dean's eyes as he thought about the things that Hidovan had told him. Every year, the military would transport a large number of people from slums and civilian areas to the Monster Research Institute in the inner wall. These people included men, women, children, elderly, and other people of different types and ages. It seemed that the Monster Research Institute was committed to studying the relationship between humans and monsters. However, he didn't know whether this cruel and destructive research was an open secret or a private experiment of the Monster Research Institute. However, to him, this might be good news. The Monster Research Institute used a large number of humans as experimental targets. It meant that they were likely to study people who were infected by undead. It was very likely that they would find a way to restore Aisha's original consciousness. This was a faint hope, but it made him feel very excited. After a moment, the priest came and took Glenn to heal. Gwyneth returned not long after Glenn had gone down. Dean didn't expect her to come back. He knew that the girl's heart wasn't with him after the previous events. Perhaps it was because of his actions that made it difficult for the girl to accept. He had long expected such a situation. That's why he sent Mason and Zack to Hawkeye for training. Gwyneth was different from Glenn and Noyce. She had experienced the feeling of being surrounded by darkness in Thornflower Prison. Her previous life was like a piece of white paper. White paper didn't refer to ignorance, but pure. As a punisher of the magistrate, he didn't know that most of the ideas instilled in her were hatred towards the dark believers and all kinds of lawbreakers. Even though she was imprisoned as a scapegoat and tortured cruelly, this young girl was not like the others. She did not completely sink into the abyss to take revenge on the world. She still had a conscience in her heart. He had already seen this and expected that sooner or later she would leave him because she could not stand what he had done. White and black could never coexist. They could only oppose each other, unless he dyed her black. "You're back." Dean quietly looked at her, his mind turning. Gwyneth silently came in front of Dean and saluted. "Master, I'm back. I've completed the task that you have given me." "Really?" Dean's eyes narrowed. "Have you checked the underground sewer structure of all the large cities in the inner wall?" Gwyneth bowed. "Yes, master." "Let me see." Gwyneth handed over a stack of snow paper from her backpack. Dean took the paper and looked at it. Each of them had a clear map of the underground sewer structure and the general appearance of the entire city. His face sank as he looked at Gwyneth. "Did you draw all of these?" Gwyneth shook her head. "I found them from the city defense department. They're the latest drawings of the city." Dean's face softened. It would be a big problem if Gwyneth said that she drew them herself. In just 24 hours, it would be very difficult for her to travel to all the cities. Moreover, it would be very difficult for her to draw so many exquisite drawings, even with her speed. "Connections? I didn't expect that you would have acquaintances after so many years." Dean looked at her. "They should know that you have been arrested and imprisoned. Why didn't they report you to the military?" Gwyneth lowered her head. "They are my relatives. They won't leak any information." Dean narrowed his eyes. "Haven't you gone to see the Laporte family? Are they doing well?" Gwyneth's body trembled. The name Laporte was like a dark cloud in her life, covering all her hope and light. It was also the existence that she always wanted to tear apart. "I didn't go." Her fingers clenched into a fist. Her chest slightly moved up and down. Dean knew that her only purpose was to use his strength to destroy the Laporte family in the inner wall. She couldn't do it by herself. After all, she was just a Sun Metal level punisher. Although she had obtained God's Marrow and had primary limitless strength, but she was too weak in front of the nobles. Even if she used sneak attacks, she could only assassinate 1 or 2 people. She would lose her life. That's why she was sent to the Thornflower Prison. The Laporte family was still prosperous, and only 1 or 2 leaves were lost. "I didn't expect you to have relatives. You must miss them after so many years." Dean said, "I would have given you more time to get together with them. If there's an opportunity, then bring them here. It's much safer than the inner wall." Gwyneth bowed her head and said, "Thank you, young master, for your kindness." Although she said yes, she knew that this is impossible. She had seen Richelieu being threatened by Dean because of his grandson's life. How could she drag her relatives into the sea of fire? Gwyneth didn't have any regrets as long as she could get revenge. Even if she had to sacrifice herself, she wouldn't have any regrets. But she didn't want to implicate other people. "You go and take a rest." Dean didn't say much as he signaled her to leave. He looked at the drawings in his hand and counted them. There were 13 drawings in total. Although he didn't know the percentage of the total population of the inner wall occupied by the 13 cities, but the effect should be the same as he expected if the plan was implemented. Thinking of this, he handed the blueprints to Noyce and said, "Find someone to make 2 copies of each of these blueprints." "Yes, young master." Noyce took the drawings. Dean and Aisha were the only ones left in the empty temple after Noyce left. Dean looked at her face. "I'll get you back soon." Aisha was silent. Dean smiled as he saw her reaction, but there was a bit of sadness in his heart. He touched her cold hand and kissed it. After a long time, he let go of her hand. He got up and went to the desk next to him. He continued to create his next invention. Now that he had electricity, he could create more things. What they needed the most right now, and it just so happened that they could produce it with their current level of craftsmanship, was the biological sensor. He didn't have to worry about sneak attacks if he used it with a lightning barrier. After all, although Aisha's perception ability was superior, she was good at hiding magic marks. Some of them might not be perceived by her. But the biological sensor he was going to make was more comprehensive. It could detect from the heat source reaction, biological magnetic field, and the echo of the ground. Even if he could hide the heat source and the sound of footsteps, it would be difficult to hide the biological magnetic field emitted by the body. If the device couldn't detect the enemy, then it was basically omnipotent. After a day and a night of reconstruction, the temple had been completely transformed into his design. Although there were not many changes on the outside, there were cables buried in the pillars and under the floor of the temple. Some of the artworks, vases, and sculptures in the temple all had hidden activation mechanisms. Once the mechanism was activated, all the wires in the temple would be charged. As long as they were touched, they would turn into light bulbs. Chapter 669. OM. A bee flew over the leaves in front of her. Eleanor didn't pay attention to it. She stuck her body close to the tree. The rough bark rubbed against her smooth skin. It was very uncomfortable, but she knew that she had to endure it. It was possible that the saintess was living in the temple 300 meters away. If she was aware that she was here, then it wouldn't be as simple as discomfort. It had been half an hour since she had sneaked into the most heavily guarded mountain in the outer wall. Moreover, she had found an excellent observation angle. As long as she didn't get close to the range of 200 meters and didn't have killing intent, then she believed that even if Aisha was here, she wouldn't be able to detect her existence. She had verified this point many years ago when she had sneaked into the Saint's Peak. There are two people scents. One of them has a male sweat smell. The information said that she has a teenager beside her. He's inseparable from her. The smell should be that boy's. Eleanor's eyes glanced at the temple. She was a master who had experienced hundreds of battles. She could detect if someone was looking at her from a distance. The other person's smell is a little similar to hers. It should be her. But the smell is mixed with the smell of blood and decay. It's a bit strange. She gently sniffed and collected the smell from the temple in front of her. There was some doubt in her heart. She was 70% sure that the other person in the temple was Aisha. She didn't die outside the giant wall as Haley had said. However, she knew Haley's temperament. She knew that 70% certainty wouldn't satisfy her. She could only continue to wait until she confirmed it with her own eyes. She waited for half an hour. 10 minutes ago, she saw a figure walking over from the window of the shrine. It was the young man who had given her the information. He had pitch-black hair, and he stood alone by the window. He held something that looked like a paper roll in his mouth, and he lit it up and puffed out smoke. When the smoke came out, it immediately made her feel nauseous. The smell was pungent and unpleasant, but looking at the youth's appearance, he didn't seem to care about the smell. He inhaled and exhaled the odorous smoke. His face didn't seem to be enjoying it, nor did it seem to be rejecting it. He seemed to be thinking about something. She looked at the corner of the window. She didn't see Aisha. She was a little disappointed, but she thought it was very kind that Aisha could tolerate such a strange smell under the same roof as Aisha with her misophobia character. Time passed quickly. It was lunchtime in the blink of an eye. She had been waiting for this moment for a long time. She saw the young man in the robe of the Pope enter the hall with his attendants. She smelled a fragrant aroma from the food covered by the lids. At the same time, she also smelled the pungent smell of blood. It was clearly raw meat. Moreover, it was the smell of raw beef. It smelled like beef. She frowned slightly. Most of the raw beef was only slightly fried. It should be the boy's food. As for Aisha, she never liked to see blood. She always ate 80% cooked food. Not long after, lunch was over, and the attendants left with the cutlery. Eleanor continued to wait for a while, but didn't see anyone come out. She couldn't help but feel depressed in her heart. Did Aisha and the boy plan to stay inside all day? Why didn't they come out? At about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was still no movement inside. She was depressed and quietly came down from the tree. Several strange limbs slowly grew out of her chest and quickly dived into the ground. This was the ability of her magic mark. After diving into the ground, her eyes were still open, but her normal eyes were now completely white, as if she had rolled her eyes. Although there was no light source in her eyes, the surroundings were not pitch black, and the crowded sand and stones around her did not damage her eyes. If one looked carefully, they would find that there was a layer of transparent, crystal-like material protecting her eyes. She listened calmly. Her perception spread along the soil like a spider's web. It extended straight to the bottom of the temple. The soil under the temple was like a dark lake, calm as a mirror. At the moment, there was a little ripple in the middle of this dark lake. In her auditory perception, these ripples were 2 feet. The feet didn't move, but the limbs above the feet all the way to the chest had a beating heart. This weak beating transmitted a faint sound through the soles of the feet to the ground and then into her ears. In addition to the ability to distinguish hundreds of thousands of smells, her hearing was the strongest weapon. The heartbeat rate is stable, and there is only one person's movement. Eleanor looked at the soil in front of her without blinking. It seemed a bit scary. She listened more attentively. The previous smell clearly belonged to 2 people. Why was there only one person's movement? Could it be that she had already sensed his presence, so she concealed her movements? But even if she wanted to cover up, how could she cover up? Could it be that she was floating in the air inside the temple? After listening carefully for a long time, there was still no movement from the second person. The doubt in her heart slowly turned into fear. Could it be that she was existing like this, but she could not sense her? Was this her new ability? She could not think of an answer. After hesitating for a long time, she gritted her teeth. A few strange limbs grew out of her body and quickly pierced through the soil, pushing her body deeper into the ground. After diving 100 meters underground, she carefully approached the temple in front of her. A moment later, she came to the bottom of the temple and continued to crawl forward for a distance before stopping. There's a cliff in another meter. Once I go out, I might expose my scent. I'm too close. Her eyes flickered, and she laughed bitterly in her heart. This was really a tough job, but fortunately, she was prepared. She immediately took out a thin black pipe from her armor, pierced through the soil, and extended it outwards. When it reached the outside, she opened her mouth and sucked in a mouthful of soil. Using her teeth and lips, she then blew into the pipe. The strength of the breath was relatively strong, and the soil in the pipe was forced out. Because of the soil in her mouth, her breath was filled with the smell of soil. It was not easy to arouse suspicion, and most people would think that it was a mountain breeze. When the pipe was connected, she took out a thin wire and a lens the size of a finger cap. She used the thin wire to tie a small pinhole in the lens, then stuffed the lens into the thin pipe. She blew it out of the pipe and exposed it on the cliff. Then, she gently moved the thin wire and pulled the lens back into an extremely small V-shaped indentation at the mouth of the pipe, causing the lens to be tilted upward at a 50-degree angle. From this angle, she could see the situation on top of the cliff through the tube. This was her favorite observation method for many years. There weren't many materials, and it was easy to carry. Moreover, it was hidden and could be thrown away without being noticed. After making the observation tool, she took out the second tube and carefully pierced it out of the soil, exposing it outside the cliff. This tube had a curved arc. She took out a small red nail that she had prepared with her and inserted it into the tube. At the end of the red nail was a glass tube device, which was her unique design. At this moment, after adjusting the angle of the red nail and the tube, she took a deep breath from the surrounding soil and blew it out. The red nail shot out quickly and followed the curve of the pipe toward the cliff. It nailed into the cliff that was tens of meters above, and the sound was extremely soft. After doing this, she began to wait quietly. Not long after, there was a sudden rustling sound on the cliff. She saw some poisonous snakes and small poisonous lizards crawling up the steep cliff. These poisonous insects seemed to be summoned, crawling in the direction of the red nail. Eleanor looked through the thin pipe and waited attentively. Chapter 670. I want these materials to be transported as fast as possible. Dean passed the list of materials for the biological sensor to Sergei. In addition, asked the Dark Church to send 5 of the best alchemists in the metal field, especially Flophus, who wrote the book Mechanical Capacity. Yes, young master. I'll go, Sergei respectfully said as he received the list of materials. He had the highest pass from the Dark Church, so he could freely go in and out of the 12th region. Moreover, the elders of the 12th region recognized him, so it was very convenient for him to do things. Dean watched Sergei leave. He was about to prepare for the next invention when he heard a rustling sound from outside the window. Although it was extremely weak, but it didn't escape his ears. It seemed that a large number of reptiles were moving around the room. Dean's eyes lit up as he looked at Noyce. Call someone to check the back hall. Noyce also heard the movement from outside the hall. Master, I'll go and check. Dean glanced at him and signaled with his eyes. Noyce was startled as he saw Dean's eyes. He realized that the situation was unusual. I know, young master. After he finished speaking, he left the shrine and quickly returned with a holy knight, saying, Go to the rear hall to check. The paladin was trembling with fear as he respectfully agreed. He quickly walked to the back of the shrine to take a look. What he saw shocked him as he saw a large number of poisonous creatures crawling up the cliff at the back, densely packed together. It seemed that the poisonous creatures saw the paladin as they crawled towards him. One of them was a green toad that was about the size of a fist. It jumped toward the paladin's face. The paladin was scared as he retreated from the window. He instinctively pulled out his sword to block, but he remembered that he had left his sword outside the temple. He hurriedly left the hall and saw Noyce waiting by the curtain. My lord, there are a lot of poisonous insects crawling up. I'll call someone clean them up. Poisonous creatures? Noyce was startled. You go back first and wait in the hall. There's no need to call people. Yes, elder. The paladin bowed his head and ran out of the hall. Noyce quickly returned to Dean's side. Dean asked, It has always been calm. How can there be poisonous creatures? Noyce was surprised. Master, what do you mean? A lot of people are jealous of us as we sit in this position. I think it's a prank. Dean looked at him. There was a glimmer of light in the depths of his eyes. Call someone to come and clean up. Sprinkle insect repellent powder on the cliff to prevent such a thing from happening again. Yes, master. Noyce was about to leave, but Dean stopped him. Take these things with you. They are disturbing my peace. Follow me to the side hall. Dean's eyes were fixed on him as he handed the paper and ink to him. Noyce felt that Dean's eyes were on him. He looked at Dean and saw that Dean's eyes flashed. Noyce winked at him. Noyce was startled, but soon recovered. There was some doubt in his heart. Was there someone spying on them? Otherwise, what was the meaning of Dean's wink? Although he didn't understand, he didn't show it. After all, he had been in the Thornflower prison, so he still had the ability to hide it. Immediately, he obediently took the dew pen and ink and led the way out of the hall. Dean shook the bell and held Aisha's hand as they walked out of the hall. 1, 2, 3. Eleanor's ears were glued to the soil, so she could hear every word that was being said above her. Even though the sound was transmitted through the air instead of the ground, it was still transmitted through the bones of the human body to the ground. The only difference was that the sound was so weak that ordinary people wouldn't be able to hear it, but Eleanor could hear it clearly. When Dean stopped his attendants from coming over to check, she felt a trace of fear and nervousness. She didn't expect the teenager to react so quickly and be so cautious. However, such a situation was within her expectation. The poisonous insects would climb into the temple, and they would have to clean them up. At the same time, she would be able to find the position of the person suspected to be Aisha. At the moment, the teenager didn't choose to clean them up, but left the temple. This made her feel relieved, but at the same time she was puzzled. The teenager looked cautious enough. Why would he mistake the poisonous insects as an attack from the outer wall? Was it because the method was too inferior? Or was it because he had too many enemies in the outer wall? Although there were doubts in her heart, her attention quickly followed the sound of footsteps. This footstep, her attention fell on the third set of footsteps, and the joy in her heart quickly turned into shock. From the image that came from her sense of hearing, she could clearly see the appearance of two people walking in the other two sets of footsteps. But this third set of footsteps was like a ghost, and she could only see the sound of 2 feet landing on the ground. In addition, there was no sound of heartbeat. There was no sound of internal organs shaking or gastric juices flowing. If she had to describe it, then it would be like a wooden person. She was bewildered. After hesitating for a moment, she decided to follow them and observe again. The monstrous limbs under her abdomen quickly fiddled with the soil, sneaking behind Dean and swimming toward the side hall. She was like a fish in the sea, shuttling freely in the soil. At this moment, she heard the people above enter a hall at the side. The young man said, "Close all the curtains." Soon the sound of curtains being pulled echoed. "Master, it's done. Come over. I have something to say to you." "Yes, master. These poisonous insects shouldn't be the work of the people from the outer wall. It should be the people from the inner wall," the teenager said as he pulled out a chair and sat down. Eleanor's heart tightened when she heard that. At the same time, her previous doubts were cleared up. It seemed that the little brat had deliberately misled her, thinking that she was watching him from afar when she released the venomous bugs. After all, lip reading wasn't a difficult task, especially for an assassin. However, the little brat was still a little brat, and he was too careless. He didn't know that she was investigating from underground. There was a trace of complacency and contempt in her heart. She listened more carefully. The people from the inner wall? The teenager's attendant was surprised. Did the monastery send someone again? The expert they sent last time was killed by you, young master. You said that the next time they send someone, it will definitely be a very powerful person. Now, shoo, lower your voice. The teenager reminded him. It could be the military. I didn't expect the people from the inner wall to act so quickly. It's time to prepare to annihilate the entire inner wall. My plan has been deployed. Inform them to prepare to start. The codename of the plan is Master. Your voice is too low. I can't hear you clearly. Be careful. The walls have ears. Come closer. Eleanor frowned. She couldn't hear the codename of the teenager. She knew that Dudian was going to repeat it, although her goal was to find out whether Aisha was here or not. But the teenager's plan to annihilate the entire inner wall sounded like a boast. Although she didn't believe that the teenager could do it, but she was still very curious. After all, even if the plan couldn't annihilate the inner wall, it would have a very strong destructive power. Do you remember? The teenager asked. Upon hearing this, Eleanor was slightly taken aback. He's already done? She didn't hear it clearly. Master, your voice is too low. Why don't you write it down? The attendant said. All right. The teenager picked up the pen. There was a slight rustling sound. Eleanor listened carefully to the voice, trying to decipher the content of the young man's words through the strokes. However, she was soon dumbfounded because the young man's strokes were completely messed up. In other words, he had written one stroke for every word in a paragraph, and the strokes were not in sequence. Even if she listened to it 100 times, she would not be able to decipher what the young man had written. Master, I'll remember. Take this token with you. They will execute the plan only if they see it. Well, go through the secret passage. Yes, master. Eleanor heard that the footsteps of the attendant were a lot heavier than before. The sound of his landing was louder than before, indicating that the weight of his body had increased. Combined with the token that Dean mentioned, it was obvious that the attendant was carrying something on his back. She hesitated. Should she continue to stay here and investigate Aisha's matter? Or should she go and see what the plan was? After thinking for a moment, she decided to go and see the plan first. Her intuition told her that she wouldn't be able to distinguish the authenticity of Aisha. If she could know the plan, then she would be able to go back and explain. After all, Hathaway asked her to come here to verify whether the monastery's statement was true or not. From the current situation, although she couldn't confirm that this person was Aisha, at least she could confirm that the monastery's pioneers were killed. There was a pioneer-level powerhouse here. Moreover, she had seen this young man's face before. He was the person that Hathaway was looking for. By completing all of this, her mission could be considered a success. If she could find out about this plan and make use of it, perhaps it could be considered a great merit. Thinking of these, she immediately swam toward the attendant's footsteps. Very quickly, the attendant followed the secret passage downwards, getting closer and closer to her. She didn't rush to make a move. After waiting for a moment, the attendant went towards St. Mark's Square. It seemed that he was going to leave from there. There was a distance of thousands of meters from the direction of the temple. Moreover, it was in a secret passage 50 meters underground. She believed that if she made a move here, it would never be noticed by Aisha in the temple. Whoosh! Chapter 671. Bang! Noyce was shocked when he heard the sound coming from the wall. He hurriedly turned his head and saw a horrifying scene. He saw a woman with a hideous body rushing out of the rock wall. Her face was full of killing intent. So fast, Noyce saw the speed at which she was rushing towards him. He felt a sense of death that he had never felt before. His whole body was cold, and the next moment, he felt his body lighten. Then there was a loud bang, and the splashing gravel hit his face. He hurriedly looked up and saw the sunlight shining. The rock wall next to him was pierced. He stared at the outside of the passage. At this moment, two slender figures were entangled together. "It's you. It's really you." Eleanor looked at Aisha in horror. Her brain was buzzing. She didn't expect to see her again. Moreover, she was so close to her. The moment she broke through the ground, she saw that the servant was carrying something wrapped in black cloth. She knew that it was the token that the youth had mentioned, but she didn't expect that the token was actually Aisha herself. Roar! Aisha's face was ferocious. Her sharp nails tightly grasped Eleanor's shoulder as she bit her face. Eleanor looked at Aisha's ferocious face. She couldn't believe that this was the invincible Aisha that she had seen in the past. That always indifferent face with a faint smile on it was so ferocious and bloodthirsty at this moment. She didn't dare to delay. She instantly stimulated the ability of her magic marks. The demon hunting tool hidden in the armor on her back trembled slightly. It instantly pierced in her body and merged with her body. Kacha! A layer of sticky black paint gushed out of the pores on her skin. It was as thick as oil and quickly solidified into a pitch-black, glossy carapace. At the same time, a few sharp barbs grew out of the spine on her back. The monstrous limbs on her abdomen seemed to have completely stretched out and were 2 to 3 meters long. Her face was also covered by a black substance. Her silky hair had long disappeared and turned into a black, forked blade. There were greenish-yellow spots in her pupils, and her vision was completely different from before. This was the complete form of her magic marks. It was hideous, ugly, and disgusting, but had super strength. Hiss! She screamed angrily, but her voice had changed. She issued a hissing sound like a poisonous lizard. Several strange limbs on her abdomen pushed forward and slapped on Aisha's chest. Bang! Aisha's body was instantly forced to retreat. At the same time, the distance was pulled apart. At this time, she noticed that Aisha's eyes were completely black like 2 deep pools. Her heart was shocked. She had seen this kind of evil eyes outside the giant wall. It was on the Corpse King's body. She suddenly thought of Hathaway's words. Could it be that Aisha was infected by the Corpse King? She immediately felt a chill in her heart and hurriedly looked at her shoulder where she had been scratched. Fortunately, she reacted in time, and the demonic carapace protected her body, so she was not scratched. She knew that the intensity of the virus active in the Corpse King's body was by no means killed by the antibodies in her body, especially the Corpse King of Aisha's level. Roar! Aisha roared and pounced again, this time faster. Eleanor's face changed. She didn't dare to stay any longer, so she turned and ran. She was not Aisha's opponent at all. Although the corpse would degenerate the brain and the combat awareness would not be as good as before, but the physique after the corpse was several times stronger than before. She couldn't imagine that with Aisha's previous physique, who could stop her after turning into a corpse? She just wanted to escape and tell the terrible news to Hathaway and the Dragon Clan. Before Eleanor's attack, in the temple, Dean sat silently, staring at the ground in front of him. His pupils shrank into a black dot. The soil under the floor was penetrated layer by layer by his X-ray vision. He could see all kinds of buried stones and cables. In the deeper place, there was a woman who didn't emit the slightest heat. She was swimming towards the place where Noise had gone. He got up and chased after them after about 500 meters away from the temple. Dean saw Aisha and Eleanor rush out of the secret passage after a few seconds. He immediately chased after them. On the battlefield, Eleanor pushed Aisha away and turned around to run. Suddenly, the bell rang. Dean stood on the high slope outside the secret passage. He shook the bell in his hand. The sound was clearly passed into Aisha's ears. He was relieved. Fortunately, he came in time. If he was a step late, then the person might have slipped away. Upon hearing the ringing of the bell, Eleanor hurriedly glanced over and saw that the little brat from the temple had actually appeared here. Her expression changed slightly as she instantly knew that her whereabouts had long been exposed. The conversation between the young man and the servant was just to lure her out. Damn! She was angry, but she didn't have time to kill the youth. She could only endure. Aisha, who was chasing after her, heard the ringing of the bell. Her body trembled slightly and stopped. Roar! She suddenly roared into the sky, and all the bones in her body made cracking sounds. The clothes on her back were torn apart, and 2 large chunks of flesh protruded out. These chunks of flesh quickly turned into 2 dragon wings, dark red in color, and the membrane on the surface of the flesh was stained with blood. It looked extremely ferocious. It was completely different from the dragon wings that she had previously displayed, which were covered with feathers. Instead, it looked more like the dragon wings that Hathaway had displayed. Dudian knew that at the moment she was relying on the power of her magic marks. She didn't have the assistance of the blood vessel, so her strength was greatly reduced. But even so, she shouldn't be underestimated. She was even stronger than Haley. Eleanor heard the roar behind her and hurriedly glanced over. Her expression immediately changed. She quickly waved the monstrous limb in front of her chest and dug into the soil. She couldn't fly, so she could only hide in the soil. Fortunately, this ability was better than flying. After all, she could be shot down if she flew in the sky. But it would be very difficult to deal with her if she was in the soil. Roar! Aisha's transformation ended quickly, and the moment the transformation of the soles of her feet was over, she rushed out impatiently. The speed of the dragon wings made the distance of hundreds of meters between them disappear in an instant. But Eleanor's reaction was fast enough. She drilled into the soil and rushed straight down before Aisha could catch up. There was no cave outside the soil that she drilled into. She drilled into the soil and covered the passage. This was the terrifying part of her ability. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.